All right, good evening, and welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting for Tuesday, August 14th, 2018. As always, this meeting is being recorded, hopefully. We will begin by taking a moment of appreciation for our troops serving in the Middle East and around the world. Thank you. I'd like to begin by noting and congratulating Town Council Mark Sorrell for being the recipient of the Massachusetts Municipal Lawyers Association President's Award. Congratulations, Mark. Yay. And it was, just to read it, it was at the annual awards presentation, August 9th, 2018, at the Public House in Sturbridge, in recognition of his outstanding and continual service to the association and municipal law, particularly his work on our annual August program. So, well done, Mark.
Thank you.
All right, first appointment, John Thompson, update regarding State Hospital property maintenance. Welcome, John.
Wow. You guys run a tight ship over here.
Only in the first half hour, John.
Thanks for having me. I just want to give you a quick update and I'll let you get to your other items. I haven't been in a while. There's a couple of events coming up. One is on Tuesday. I have the Army Air National Guard doing some exercises at the hospital. And originally it was scheduled for Wednesday, but I've been in contact with them and they want to do their training on Tuesday. So it'll be an all-day event on Tuesday. They're only using a small portion of the property, and they will be out of there on Wednesday. So Monday, they'll do what's called recon. On Tuesday, they'll do the exercise. And then they'll be demobilized on Tuesday. So I would just want to let you know that. And then the Hunt Club is there on September 11th. Other than that, we have the contractors from MIT doing some drone research up there. We're still working on some dates with them. And they do pay us for their time and use at the hospital. So that's about it for now. The landscaping's going well. There's some masonry issues that I need to work on and some roof issues. The dogs seem to be fairly well behaved this summer. Haven't had too many incidents up there with dogs. And I've also done some work with DCAM and DCR. I've met at the Overlook with both representatives from DCAM and DCR recently. And they need some special equipment to cut the long grass on the slopes of the Overlook Park. I did get them to cut the top of it, so they've done an initial cut there. But because of the angle of the slopes, they need some bigger brush hog type equipment. And so they're trying to pull that together, and that will be cut. So basically, they're going to cut all the grass on the slopes around the top of the Overlook Park, and they'll also cut below the trail that goes around the outside of it down to the gas line. So that'll be pretty wide open again. And then I also spoke with DCAM and met with the Chief of Staff regarding the access road. They are committed to making sure that the access road will get built. I think there's a deadline. I don't know if it's next year, but they gave me their word that they are talking to DCR, February 19, and they gave me their word that they will build the access road. I did go to the bottom Hospital Road where we talked about building a small parking area at the end, the entrance to the trail that parallels the old rail line that went into the power plant. So they're going to build a small parking area at the base of the hill there, and then they'll probably run the road will sort of follow what was the old Canal Street, which is a cart road that you see now. And they'll bring it up to the edge of the field, A2, and they'll run it in and merge it with the bike rack at the Overlook Park. There's a bike rack there, and so that's the plan. And they said that they will build the access road. And Bill knows more about the details of Medfield's involvement per the land disposition agreement and any maintenance following construction. But they did commit to me that they will build it. That's it. Questions?
Okay. Any questions?
You guys, any questions?
Well, I last saw John up at the hospital, and he had enlisted the service of somebody with a drone to do investigation of the roofs. How did that go?
There's some places where the roofs need some repair, and that's why Christine and I have been working on a bid to do some roof repair. Some of the shingles, the slate shingles, have come off this winter from ice and snow, and if I keep up with that, I can keep the insides of the building in good condition. Some of the valleys are bad. The valleys are where the roof comes together, forms a valley, and that's where water concentrates in the valleys. And so we did see some of those valleys, some water's getting in a few of the buildings. But other places where the state had repaired some of the slate with asphaltic shingle, and the asphalt shingles have come off, so all that's left is wood. So the water gets in there. And they're not large, extensive repairs, but they are repairs that if we make them, we can keep the buildings in good condition until the property is repurposed.
I had a comment and a couple of questions.
Sure, yes.
One, I was just curious whether you've gotten any feedback on the Boy Scout Eagle project with the signs that went in?
Yeah, they had, and thanks for mentioning that. The Eagle Scout, Ian Gibson built some signs, or had some signs made as his Eagle Scout project. I know he came before you, and put them up around the campus, and a lot of great feedback on that, because it helps to orient people and help them understand what the buildings were used for. So I did ask him to put some little buttons on the sign, so that a little "You Are Here" button, so people could see where they were standing in relation to the hospital campus. And he did put those on there, so they're really nice. You might want to put one at our expense on the back of one that he placed on Longmeadow, because when you walk through the property, you only see the back of that sign. People that come in from Longmeadow see the front of the sign. But people walking through the campus from any other direction only see the back of that sign. They don't see the front of it. So they weren't that expensive, and it might be worth our while to put a sign on the back side of that. But other than that, yeah, the feedback's been great. People really find them helpful, including I've talked to people this summer from Europe who they find it on Google or whatever, and they want to tour it. So I've met a few people that were just tourists coming from across the pond, and they really like the signs and walking the campus and the overlook.
The tourism is still an angle that we can look at.
There you go.
This is
Thank
good
you.
to hear. No, I had more.
More to come.
For the two of you, I was delinquent in passing word on to John that Dick Kroll had offered to sponsor a dog waste barrel at the state hospital on behalf of the Medfield Veterinary Clinic, and
Yeah.
you asked for contact information.
Yes.
I have the email 3/4 of the way written. I
Okay.
just couldn't finish before I had to come here. So that's one comment. And then a question, only because this email just came out from Joy about the revolving fund. I think the first point we're all clear on is the reason that there was no funding appropriated this fiscal year for the state hospital maintenance wasn't because the town wasn't gonna spend money on it. It was that we had enough money in the revolving fund to where we didn't need to ask for what's normally $150,000 each year to support maintenance. So to the extent there was any confusion about why that money didn't come in this year, that's the reason. I was happy to see that the revolving fund balance was still $200,000, which was reassuring, but it did prompt one question for me, given the comment that, about maybe we need to sit down and think about how to be careful about it. Who can tap that revolving fund? It's you and
You
you,
vote,
right?
correct, and the selectmen voted that you would approve any large expenditures out of the revolving
Okay.
fund. So you sign any contracts for them.
Okay, so the question of, that would cause me to feel comfortable that the question of control of revolving fund expenditures is pretty adequate, yes,
Yes, I've been processing them.
okay.
And I appreciate that, and there's no, at this point, there's no large looming expenditure that I can think of as far as.
Just the
related to
landscaping.
The landscaping is really the
Yeah.
biggest chunk of that.
Yeah.
That's right.
but we're monitoring that. And we actually, I just billed for the drone testing $17,000, so that will be coming in as revenue. And they've contacted us for multiple more dates, so we do have some revenue coming in as well.
Does the town do the plowing in the winter?
Yes, the town does, yeah. And they only do the perimeter, Pete. They don't do all the roads.
Right.
They just do the outer perimeter. We thought from a security reason, it was better to just do the outer road for people to walk on.
So that, I guess, raises in my mind the question of whether, if we're doing the plowing in the winter, should we be looking at doing the mowing in the summer? I mean, I know that Roberta was doing her own mowing at the Council on Aging, and it might make sense for the town to look at doing these things ourselves, rather than hiring somebody else to do it.
Probably you would
Well-
have to take a look at your equipment.
I think that, but the reason why we originally went out to bid and did a private contractor was we can recover some of the money for that, so that was part of our operating expense that we'll be recovering through our costs, so.
Otherwise, you have to set up a charge number or whatever to keep track of the hours that are going up there. I think
Yeah.
you've got enough issues already keeping
Right,
track of
at the time that we set this up, we didn't have the staff or the equipment to be able to do the job that we're doing, but you may hear something about that later with some restructuring I have to talk about.
Pete, for what it's worth, although this is not relevant to the state hospital, I do think there's a greater coherence that could be brought to the allocation of responsibilities for maintaining various town properties. And as far as I can tell, where we are at is an artifact of where individual budget decisions were made.
I mean, it's been
So
kind of a
that's-
funny
yeah.
journey, because DPW did it for a while, and then they stopped. And I don't remember exactly why they stopped, and Park and Rec, or I think it went out to a private contract, and then Park and Rec started hired somebody to do it themselves. And they've been doing most of it, but I guess the hospital came along, and that's been let as a separate contract.
Just by way of, the amount of labor it takes to do the hospital, it takes 5 days to cut it. They start at the front, and 5 days later, they're finished in the back. So if they do that twice a month in the summer, they get a couple of weeks off, and then they have to be back on the mower again at the front. It's almost 90 acres. It's a lot of cutting. It's labor intensive. And if it rains, they have to take a break in between and get back on the mowers, so.
So aside from that, though, your point about Roberta probably shouldn't be the one that has to cut her own grass at the center is a valid point.
The Park and Rec does 9 locations in town.
Bill, you got a comment?
Yeah, John,
But microphone. This is your first time.
I thought we were getting Bill his own microphone.
they were supposed to wire me up in the green room, but
Should he identify himself?
John, just a couple of comments. A couple of people asked me about the signs.
Yes.
So they were pleased with them and everything else, and at the time, I wasn't sure. I remember having attended the meeting here when the Eagle project came through. You might consider putting a little note up there that it was an Eagle project or whatever, and get a little publicity for the.
They didn't do that?
Well,
assumed it
if
was-
they are,
Wow.
it's not at the sign that is the most obvious to me, which is the one at the back towards the laundry building. And I would also say that people tend to park around that sign now too, so obviously it's getting a lot of interest. So if there's not somebody taking credit for it somewhere, they ought to get an attaboy somewhere.
Yeah, he didn't put his name on it, or,
Didn't,
yeah.
yeah.
So I
It's a
would
nice
suggest
idea.
to do that.
Call the
And I
trip
just wanted to, in terms of the DCAM mowing and everything else, I'm not sure what the requirements are, but should they be cleaning out the rain gardens?
Depends. The one at the top, they probably won't because it's level, but the ones closer to the lower level where the access road rings the overlook, they should clean that out.
So I would,
Because
if you get
it's
that on
small.
your list for
Yeah.
the DCAM to make sure because I noticed the one at the top is really overgrown. There is a
It is.
requirement that they're supposed to clean them out.
Right.
I don't know if that means mowing or whether, as they fill in with runoff, with the.
I would expect they'll
Okay.
eventually clean it. And they got some erosion problems in the little ring road. So if you drive at the overlook, just go slowly. There's some potholes and some erosion issues at the
That's
top.
all I got. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John. All right, Anna May?
Hi there, thank you very much for having me this evening. I'm so sorry I missed the last meeting. You guys work hard. No rest for the weary. So I'm here tonight to ask for permission on behalf of the fairly new organization called the Medfield Coalition for Suicide Prevention. And September is Suicide Awareness Month, and I was inspired. I was in Needham about a couple of months ago, and all their parking poles were wrapped in green, and I thought, oh, that's curious. What is that? So I went up to it, read the thing about Alzheimer's awareness, and it made me think that art can be a very powerful thing. You know, all our organizations, we put out press releases and various things, but there's something about a visual. So for Suicide Prevention Month, a group of us got together, Jean Minio, Sharon Tatro, her daughter Rachel Tatro, about ideas of what we could do, a simple and effective art installation in Medfield. And we thought of uplighting Town Hall with LED lights. The colors for suicide awareness are purple and turquoise. And Sharon Tatro has a connection to get these uplights, and so that is one part. So light is a very powerful symbol. So illumination, the town, the community coming together to bring light to those who suffer. And so that was the background for that idea. And also a second point that we are asking permission for is the trees and the poles outside, to wrap them in yarn. Today, at Blake Middle School, Diane Horvath, who runs the Makerspace, she enlisted some teachers and colleagues and folks. We didn't want to go too crazy because we haven't gotten approval, but we have started. And the idea is to have, much like what happened at the Hospital Hill a few years ago, wrapping the trees, but these, it's called #YarnForHope, and we would have other words, either love or hope or various things, and each wrap around a tree or a pole would also have the name of the person who knitted this, and also some tags, either a QR code or information about suicide prevention that's happening in Medfield. And these are all lovingly made, hugging a tree, hugging a pole, just like, you know, I get a little too kumbaya, but the symbolism is there, so I think you know where I'm going with it. And the third request, pretty please, is the electric time clock out in front. I understand that that lighting can be changed, and wondering and hoping if I could reach out to the Herb family company and ask if that could be either purple or turquoise during the month of September. Any questions?
I think it's a really cool idea. I like it a lot. I mean, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking to myself, gee, it'd be really fun if you could somehow make it interactive, like when you wrap the tree, try to encourage people to add things onto the yarn in some way. I think that would be...
This is fluid, yes.
So I think it's a great idea. I thank you for doing it. Thank you for bringing it to us.
Thank you.
So this wouldn't be a good meeting if we were all just in agreement. I have questions at two
Sure.
levels. And the first level is not for you, it's actually for my two colleagues here. And it's good that this is the example that's on the table, because I would say this is an apolitical example. I harbor a concern about using public buildings to make public statements about specific issues. And I'm actually more concerned about using them when it becomes a political issue. And the example, I don't consider this a political issue, so it's a policy question that I'm raising that's a broad policy question about, do we want the town hall to be a billboard for messages conveyed in light, or could potentially be any other thing, and what are the rules we want to live by? Let me give you an example. Let's say that 6 months from now, somewhere here in New England, some minority person gets killed by a cop in a city nearby. And suddenly, and of course, there's a big uproar, as there always is, and suddenly there's a movement and somebody comes in and says, I'd like to bathe the town hall in blue because blue lives matter. It becomes a political issue, and we get into a very murky situation where suddenly the town hall becomes a billboard for speech that is advocating a particular position. What's nice about it is we can talk about it here, and I'm not implying that there's a political piece to that. But when I first saw the idea, that was my concern, is that suddenly this becomes a billboard, and it's not a proper use of the town
It is a
hall.
concern, and Mark will tell you that we're at risk if we do it, because we've had some noxious people that will come and ask to do it.
Yeah, so that's,
I think we've resisted putting signage on the town hall property prior to this for that very reason.
so, I may not even need to get to the specifics here. That's, if we have a sense of yes or no in the town hall, for what it's worth, the town clock, I don't think is the same. I don't think even necessarily, although I could be talked into it, but I don't even think necessarily doing something with the trees is an issue.
It
But I have
doesn't matter,
concerns.
unfortunately, it doesn't have to be verbal speech. It can be, as was indicated, there's other forms of communication that are more dramatic. Any kind of expression is covered, and yeah, we're at the top of a slippery slope. And you know, everybody's on board, you know, who could possibly be opposed to this one, but the next thing out of the box could be way more controversial, as you indicate.
So that's my.
Once you do it for
fundamental
one, you've established, I mean, there is a doctrine called, which is evolving, called government speech, but I'm not comfortable relying upon that, because that's something that's just only recently being carved out by courts.
And we do allow it. Memo puts banners across the public way. We allow that.
But it's only an event. At least that's justifiable at the date, time, and place.
Well, this is an event too.
What's a month?
It's an event that goes for a month.
I mean, so my question,
I mean, the summer
Would there
concerts
be a
goes
more
for a couple
appropriate-
months, so.
for the message, would there be a more appropriate location in town? So I'm not fundamentally opposed to the message, although I think in this issue, you have to think very carefully about all the different people that are affected one way or the other by this issue, and make sure that what you do is not something that makes it
Respectful.
harder.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But would there be a better location? Because to me, part of this is the town hall, it's the emblem of our town government that's of particular.
I guess Baxter Park, you've already allowed that to be used for holiday lighting, and it's respectful,
That would sit easier with me.
it's visible.
We've done it, in the past several years, we've done it with the Donate Life banner in the town hall lobby, commemorating the Organ Donor Awareness Month. We've done that the last 4 or 5 years. It's not a routine occurrence. I mean, Mark, how many of these cases are there against towns in Massachusetts? I mean, you go by Boston City Hall, there's always one flag or another flying up there that have a variety of political messages associated with them. Does the city of Boston get sued a lot?
Usually you don't know until the phone rings and it's the ACLU. So I've had that happen on occasion. So it all depends. If somebody makes a complaint, if nobody complains, then it goes merrily on its way. There's just no predictability,
I mean, is the law generally that if you allow it for one, you have to allow it for all?
pretty much. As I said, the exception is what's called the government speech doctrine. And that's only evolved in the context of websites up until now, electronically.
We've had, I can think of at least 3 complaints about signage on private property. And we've told the people, we don't control private property, so there's nothing we can do. It's allowed by the courts. One of them was a homeowner on West Street put signs up during the Obama administration. You may recall that. Then there was another one when Lyndon LaRouche supporters were standing outside on Main Street in the morning during commuter rush hours. And the third was we had a complaint about the Unitarian Church posting a banner, Black Lives Matter banner, and the individual wanted us to take it down and said we can't. That's the church's free speech rights. So it is an issue that will come up.
And there was a group going around during, ironically, kind of what you alluded to, but they were coming to local communities from the outside and putting this whole display up, "We support our police," and putting, I think, the blue and black flags or banners around. So there's all kinds of stuff out there. There's no good deed goes unpunished.
To your point, like right now, our policy is if we have a good cause that wants to put a poster up in the town hall to let people know about it, that's how we do that. Maybe even that's too permissive, but I can see that. A highly visible symbolic speech that can mean whatever people want to take it to mean or whatever people want to interpret it to mean. I find in observing what's going on in a lot of towns that that's opening up what I would personally see as a improper use of government to advance particular causes, and that's the thing and it's not this one that I'm talking about, but it is one that gives me some real pause. It's just a misuse of government to advance particular causes, and this one, not because I think this one's bad, but I do think it opens up a can of worms.
I guess if we had a bright and hard and fast line, I guess I would be more inclined to agree with you, Gus. But we've got a very imprecise line, and we've already made exceptions for all kinds of people. So
If that's true, then I think we should impose a bright and fast line, not allow a fuzzy line to get fuzzier and drift wherever it drifts. If I kind of have viewed it as, it is kind of a line. We don't do this on the town hall. We have allowed posters inside the town hall. That has not been abused. I would imagine even if there was something like that, if we suddenly realized it was being used the wrong way, we'd change our policy and get rid of that too.
holiday lights at Baxter Park?
If
By a
we need to
business
get,
group?
if we need to get rid of them, then get
Actually,
rid of them.
that's another kind of, goes both ways. That's far from clear, but it's actually, there've actually been cases that have upheld that as just a lighting display.
As opposed to a religious display?
Right.
The reindeer kind of.
Yeah.
Do you want to take some time to think about it, maybe contact other towns to see if anybody's developed policies on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we think we need a policy on it, we should have a policy on it, and shouldn't just say no, because we don't have a policy on it. I mean, I don't like the notion of that we're gonna do this simply to give sort of a heckler's veto to whoever might come along and wanna cause a problem, right? And that's sort of the way people are now, is they don't wanna say anything or do anything, because my goodness, someplace might get mad about it, and they're gonna yell at us, and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I don't.
My fundamental issue is the use of the town hall as a billboard.
Yeah, no, I understand
Okay,
that,
okay,
but
okay.
there's two separate issues there, right? I mean, I think, and that's a fine philosophical view to have. But the separate question is, if you're concerned about liability for this, that to me is a more manageable concern, right? I mean, if the idea is that public buildings have to express no view on anything, fine, then they express no view on anything. But if the concern is that we might get sued or somebody might cause problems for us, I don't really want to not do something that would be worthwhile doing just for that reason. A lot of people make a lot of decisions just because they're afraid of the 0.2%, we're gonna get all riled up about something. And so I don't think that's a good reason not to do it. So I think we should think about a policy and how it would work and kind of understand what kind of a risk we're taking on.
So let me go to my specific questions for you, Anna Mae. Who does this help?
Who does this help?
Yeah, who does it help?
So the purpose of the Medfield Coalition for Suicide Prevention is to raise awareness in the community, because there are lots of people who suffer in silence. And so we're trying to educate. We're running QPR sessions. We did one at the senior center, and we've done it at places of faith, and we're going to do them at the library. So it's building awareness, and it's building and trying to tear down the stigma. And so that's, and we're trying to come to a community. On this coalition, you know, school administrators, the police, houses of worship. So this is truly the community coming together in trying to help those who are suffering in silence. And so we thought Town Hall, a symbol of our community, of an organization that is representative of our community, that we thought that, you know, I hear what you're saying, and I just think, oh, for goodness sake, you know, but I understand, but I also feel that this organization is the community coming together to try and help those who have suffered or are suffering.
So I'm not taking a position on this, but I will share a perspective, having been closer to this issue than I ever thought I would be pulled over the last year. An awareness month, and making sure the messaging that goes out, the things that the town does to let people know what's out there. What I found myself asking myself is, if I were someone who is plagued by thoughts of suicide, will a big lit-up building somehow bring me anywhere to a good spot, or will it bring me to a worse spot? If there's a family that's lost someone to suicide, is this a building that's going to help me feel better about it? And I'm saying this just to share a perspective. I don't have the answers. It's what I'm wrestling with. I understand the people who want to help will feel great that the programs and the things we're doing get greater visibility, but where my head went was to the people who are affected directly by this. Is this a thing that helps them, or is it a thing that hurts them? I don't have the answer to that.
And every family is different, you know, and every family deals with pain differently and views it differently. So I suppose the thought, and we have families who have been affected on the coalition, because it's very presumptuous for us to say, ooh, this would be really great for you. We can't do that. So we're trying to be respectful, to be holistic about the approach. And the main thing is awareness that it is happening, it has happened, and how can we move forward so people, you know, the town started Interface, you know, for folks to call a number to help them find therapists, because that's, you know, so it's I think that the community coming together, and
Well, I wanted to share that because it's been on my mind.
oh, I know, that's fair.
So I guess just as full disclosure, I've been going to the meetings of the coalition. I don't know that there's a membership list, but I get their emails, and so I've been participating. In terms of who does it help, I think that the concept that I think of with this issue is that if there's greater awareness, I think that there is ways for people who are that seriously unhappy and depressed to get assistance, and that if they can get the assistance, then maybe we can save some lives. I mean, for me, that's the goal.
That piece
You
I agree with.
articulated that
The
well.
question the question I'm asking is, a lit-up building is not an articulated message. It's a symbolic message that
Absolutely.
means something
Yeah.
to whoever. You have to figure it out.
Yeah, and I imagine that there'll be connections that will lead you to the places where there are the articulated messages, and where people can then sort through the information know that there is in fact this coalition, and the coalition can have information out to the community. People can know where they can go to get assistance and get help, and that this doesn't have to be an insoluble problem, that there are ways that it can be
okay.
better.
I think to Gus's point, and I think it's a good question, right? And because, I mean, if empirically, if this were, and again, this is not a negative comment, empirically, if this were true, then you should just do this permanently, right? I mean, if this were gonna actually have that sort of an effect, then why wouldn't you just do it all year round, right? And so.
Then people wouldn't notice, you have to
Well,
keep
I
turning
mean,
it on and
you know,
off.
I think it's, I want to think more about Gus's question here on this point, right? And-
I'm actually thinking of people who've been affected by it, to be honest. They're the ones I'm thinking of, and
Of course.
And my guess is you'd probably get a different answer from different people. Some
Exactly.
people would say, well, great, it brings me a lot of comfort. Other people would say, no, it doesn't.
I think that's true.
Yeah.
Nothing is coming, as you well know, nothing is coming out of malice or.
I don't know,
No.
yeah, no. I'm not suggesting that.
No,
I am.
We don't think you're
I'm
here
trying to-
to
I'm
make
trying
a
to
buck
look-
off the yarn, MMA.
Yeah, I'm trying to be sure that I'm clear-eyed about
Yes,
how some people would.
Absolutely. I
You know,
agree.
I often think that when you talk about free speech, the usual place in the public arena for free speech are town commons. And I wonder if a place like either, if somebody suggested Baxter Park, Meeting House Pond, or across the street, would be a better location, and that it would be associated with free speech, as town commons frequently are.
Aren't there lights in the gazebo?
There is a overhead light,
Oh,
yeah,
it could be.
yeah. So,
It would be easier for me, even the library, it is a public building, but it's not the public
Yeah.
building of government. It's the,
and that's associated with free speech, and
Yeah.
too, so it might be
yeah.
a better
By the way,
way to do
this,
it.
this group, this coalition is the group that got the town $30,000 out of the state budget this year. It's the only state money I think that we got other than our local aid. So,
We'll get into that later on when you hear what some of the state budget went for this year.
Yeah, none of my comments have anything at all, even remotely disparaging to imply about the group. And again, I have reason to know that certain things that are connected to this are very effective. So there's no implied
Yeah.
criticism here. I truly am trying to,
No, and I understand
about
you're trying,
this,
you're
yeah.
being mindful of what's to come.
right.
So it sounds like we need to think about this one, NMA.
Sounds like
I don't know
it.
that you need to come back, but we need to think about it.
Okay.
And Mark, maybe put some stuff together for us and we can kind of.
So is the question the uplighting, or is it the yarn as well? The yarn wraps?
It's any kind of expression.
Well, I mean, not all of the trees in town are publicly owned trees.
Right.
In fact, I think a lot of the trees around downtown are not publicly owned trees. And so any private tree owner can let you put whatever you want on their trees.
Or lighting on private property as well.
Yeah, and we don't control, I mean, I think of the trees in downtown, other than the ones directly on town land, most of them are on, even though trees that are lining the streets are not publicly owned trees.
They're not within the layout.
Now, would
And
it,
I do think Mike's point about there can be public land, it's, the purpose of which is to discuss, debate, communicate. So it's not even necessarily, in my mind yet, that it can't be public land. It's just, I had an issue about the use of the town hall specifically. I think Mark broadened it to an issue of the use of the town hall property more broadly.
right,
And then the other issue was, I think I just needed to register it. And
so, all right, public trees, the poles, the electrical
telephone poles.
telephone
We
poles?
don't own those either.
We've used those for art. It was a little hard to tell what the art was. I don't know if that was the
It's
most effective
Eversource.
art,
You'd have to
but-
approach Eversource on that.
I'm sorry, say that again?
It's Eversource.
So I-
Eversource owns the
So
poles.
I should contact Eversource?
If that's where you want to put them.
All right. So town hall, you guys are going to discuss, and then so possibly the library or possibly Baxter Park. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think
Possibly the gazebo, and that's what you'll get back to me on.
I think technically part of the library, you need the library trustees to approve it.
Is Baxter Park under the purview of Park and Recreation Commission?
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Baxter Park is under the purview of the Parks and Recreation Commission.
Okay,
So we'll have to involve them in the conversation as well.
all righty. Thank you, folks.
Thanks, Emma.
Thank you, Anna Mae.
Do you want to put this on the agenda for the next meeting to
Yes,
discuss?
please. Yeah. As a discussion item for next week. Okay, do we have any citizen comment? items?
No, thanks.
All right, let's go through some of our contracts. We have to sign the state primary warrant
Oh, yeah.
on the September 4th primary. Any discussion or questions about this one? We have a motion.
I move that we sign the September warrant for the September primary.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, now we have the agreement with Badge Quest for the police chief recruitment services.
Correct. You voted to award this contract at the last meeting, and this is to actually sign the contract.
Okay. And give me a second. I move that we sign or approve the Badge Quest contract in support of the police chief search.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. I think this ALANCO is the one we're going to defer, correct? Dan, do you want to be heard on it? Okay. I thought this was the one we didn't have the attachment to it.
No, that was
Yeah, I don't think you had this
Yeah,
one in
you
your
don't.
packet either.
we were going to defer that for a week.
This one.
Right, you have it here. We didn't have it to send to them
Okay.
for the
well,
meeting.
If,
Yeah, Dan, you can give us a little summary. We
Sure.
won't deal with it until next week, but.
okay, sure. Daniel Bible, I'm one of the curators at the Medfield Historical Society. I have a check here made out to the town of Medfield for $11,985, which I'll be happy to turn over to the selectmen or to Christine or whomever
Give it up.
has his or her hand out first.
What time's Avenue close?
Yeah, I know Avenue probably wouldn't, this wouldn't cover.
It's never open when our meetings are done anyway, so.
The reason we've come before you is the Historical Society is in a town-owned building, but the Historical Society is responsible for the maintenance of the facility. We have a furnace there which is about 60 or 70 years old, which has had its, I mean, if we're, all of us who are 60 or 70 years old, we've had our physical problems. The furnace has had it as well. We have gotten a bid from Alanco, is that the name of the company? To do a replacement of a new oil furnace for about $11,900. They are an approved vendor. I believe they are under a state contract. I'm not sure the details of that. And we have the agreement. We have 3 copies of the agreement, which needs the selectman's signature, Mark Sorrell's signature, and Joyce.
Joy Rashudo.
Yeah, and we have the check to pay for this. Personally, I would rather we had gone for a gas furnace, which I believe would be cheaper in the long run, but a gas furnace, we have found out, would be about twice as expensive, about $20,000. And in addition, we'd have to pay for a gas line to come into the building. So it would be much more expensive. The Historical Society has the funds on hand to pay for it, but it's a big chunk of the amount of funds that we have available. We are going out to Middlesex Savings Bank and Needham Bank and to our members to raise, to try and get more money. And I believe David Temple was here before you recently to ask the town for some support on this. Whether that is going to go forward, I do not know. But we want to do this before winter, obviously, to make sure that we have heat in the building.
Just so you're not confused, you already did vote to allow them to transfer and move to the gas, but then upon further review and before we could sign the official final contract, there were additional costs that were coming in. It was going to be too cost prohibitive, and the costs were not as upfront as we thought.
Yeah.
So then the Historic Commission decided to switch to go to the oil instead of trying to upgrade to the gas.
Right. Right. So, I mean, it's, whatever we do, I mean, the Historical Society is responsible for the payment, and we are certainly willing to do that. In the long run, it might be cheaper to go to gas, but for the immediate cost, it would be about 100% more than the bid we have before us. So, you know, just biting the bullet, we need to go
Right.
forward with what we can do right now.
One of the major problems David and I worked on for changing to the gas was that they had to require a minimum gas usage, which, as you know, the Historical Society building is not used on a daily basis, so we were concerned we would not be able to meet that, and then the cost was going to escalate.
Right, yeah, exactly. So we have this agreement, we have copies of it, we have a check. Actually, it's a pass-through. I don't think the town actually makes any money out of this, but the check is made out to the town of Medfield, so you could show a little bit of money for a few days before this gets passed on to somebody else. So I have these, I'd be happy to leave them. If you need to discuss this further or have us come back for a future meeting, we'd be happy to do that.
Okay. I think the issue is we just didn't have copies of the contract,
Sure.
and so we'll put it on for next week.
We'll put it on for next week, but I don't think Dan or,
Okay.
but I don't think Dan or David need to attend next week. I
No.
think we can just vote to sign the
All right.
contract.
And I will just give these to Ms. Clark, and she can make sure that you folks sign it.
Great. Pete, any questions or?
Nope.
Gus?
Mark, I actually have probably comments for you, and given that this is a pass-through, you can just tell me, don't worry about it. But when I read this, Section 5 talks about payment for work, and aside from the fact that attachment A wasn't there, when I read paragraph 5 here, I couldn't tell whether this was a fixed-price contract or a time and materials contract. So the wording, to me, is not very good. It says you'll be paid based on the price contained in contractor's quote, which we didn't see, but,
Was attached, the copies I provided were attached.
but it says the town shall make payments on the basis of the work completed. There's another contract in here that has the same kind of open-ended. So payments on the basis of the work completed, it doesn't talk about anything about subject to the maximum value of the contract, which is what threw me off. I'm not sure if it's fixed price or if it's time and materials with a cap.
It is a fixed price.
It's fixed price?
It
is not?
It is a fixed price, and there is an agreement between the Historic Society and the town, so that if they start the work and there are increases to the price, the Historical Society will cover the increases. So we do have an agreement with them on that.
So, and I'll give you this, Mark. You can,
Well, I
if I'm being-
provided copies to Dave Temple, who took it to the vendor or sent it to the vendor to sign.
so
I
the
don't know
second.
what it is you have there.
I got what was circulated. On page 3, under termination, section A, the town shall pay all reasonable and supportable costs incurred prior to termination, which payment shall not exceed the value of services provided. Well, the value of services provided, as I read this, is whatever the contractor says. There's no reference here to the maximum value of the contract is what I'm getting at. I think what it's really trying to say is that we will pay the proportion of the work that has been completed up to the max value of the contract. But the way this reads, to me, it's not really making it clear it's a fixed price contract. It actually has two different places where it suggests that the contract will pay whatever the value of the services provided are. And I realize for something like this, chances are it's straightforward anyway. But if you get into a contentious legal battle with somebody, those kinds of open-ended clauses can get you in trouble. And so if it's possible to get the wording
Well, there was a
straight.
fixed price at the early part of the contract. I didn't bring my file with me tonight
Okay.
because I wasn't.
Okay. I'm happy to
It was a
leave.
standard vendor's contract that was modified for this project and is
And my comment,
generally pretty tight language.
well, I've got two paragraphs. I don't think tight at all.
Well, because you have to read them in the context of the earlier ones that restrict it. The pricing contract and all.
You mean attachment A that we haven't seen?
No, the first part of the contract,
Yeah,
where the price is set out.
yeah.
So there's a piece of this contract we haven't seen?
Well,
I don't know what you
We're
have.
talking about that.
It's on the first page. It says, under witness, whereas the contractor submitted a quote for $11,000,
Yep.
and this was actually changed, $985 to perform the work required.
If it had said a fixed quote, you'd have me.
I
It
did
is.
not, I did not negotiate this or write it. I believe this went through town council, and I defer to him on the language.
Okay. So my point, and on this particular thing, Mark, I'm happy for you to tell me, don't worry about it. My point is, the reading I have on this contract is it is not clear it's a fixed price contract. It sounds like it's a fixed price contract, but the terms, in terms of how we figure out what we get paid, we're gonna pay the value of the services that are
copies
provided.
that emanated from my office had 4 pages, a 4-page attachment Exhibit A on it.
Okay.
I don't know
If-
what you have or where it came
Only,
from.
I don't have
We didn't get
Exhibit A.
attachment A.
Yeah, we didn't get exhibit. So if attachment A makes it clear it's a fixed price contract, then my problems all go away.
Well,
Right
that's-
now
yeah,
with what I
that's-
saw.
That's
Okay.
the vendors telling you what they're gonna do for the
Okay.
money.
Okay, as long as it's
Actually-
there, then I'm
Actually,
fine.
it's 3 pages of specs and then a response from the contractor.
So there's a stunning reason why you never want to send us a partial contract without attachment A. All right, so we're going to pick it up next week with attachment A,
With
and
attachment
presumably
A.
my
Did
question
we
will be
get it
answered.
back from the vendor?
Dan has it tonight.
I have this, and it is signed by the vendor.
Okay.
And who
Deal
should,
with it next week.
I'll give this to Mrs. Clark. Okay.
If I may, David Temple, when you gave those contracts to David, he kept them. He didn't, there wasn't any copy given, to me. He just went ahead and went to the vendor. The next day, I got the first page of the contract from your office because
The
the
price.
price was changed,
Yes.
and that's all I sent
Okay.
in your package on Friday. So I don't know what the papers you have before you, where you got them. Is that from when Dave was here the first time?
It must be the Russians hacking your email.
That's not funny.
Yeah. No, but
So,
when
so
Dave
Dan,
was
you're
here-
you're at the back end of this is the third contract that's come before the selectmen that did not have complete paperwork.
Okay.
So part of why I'm being obstinate,
no.
at least, I won't say they're being obstinate, but why I'm being obstinate is because it's the third time we've been asked to sign a
I
contract that we haven't.
absolutely understand.
Okay.
I'm very clear about what your concerns are.
Okay.
And I think for the Historic Society, we have a tiny amount of money in the bank, and if we blow it, we're in serious trouble. So I have absolutely no problem with your concerns, because obviously, when you're replacing a furnace, things could go wrong. There could be problems that we're not aware of, and the bidder isn't aware of, and so I appreciate your comments and your concern. And who do I give the check to? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan, appreciate it.
Selectmen only take cash.
I'm sorry, it's not made out of Next time.
We'll do it next week, but you don't need to come back. All right, the Select Energy contract, I think this time we did get the whole thing, and the contract document paragraph was amended to exclude the terms and conditions.
Yes.
Did you see?
So, my comment about this one is the exact same as a comment I had on that one, is, again, termination, Section A, for cause, the town shall pay all reasonable and supportable costs incurred prior to termination, which payment shall not exceed the value of services provided, rather than saying shall not exceed the value of the contract awarded. It's
Well, it's
a
gotta-
couple $1,000s a year. I'm not gonna fall on my sword on this one either, but that's not good wording for a contract.
The problem with that is.
Point
I
is, this is supposed to be lower than the max. Like
I know, but it doesn't say that.
Right.
It just says it can't exceed the value of the services provided.
No, that's for what is called a quantum merit claim legally, that they're not gonna be paid more than for what they've actually done up to that point. The contract being a cap, if they put a claim in because you throw them off the job, you're not gonna pay them any more than what they've actually done.
If we,
Not the
so-
contract,
so,
they're not
okay.
gonna get the full contract, they're just gonna get the value of what they've actually done.
But if they say after they've been terminated, well, the value of the services we provided is actually 150% of the contract
No,
because, you're sure? Okay, all right, there we go.
One of the things.
This contract has an amount per year, what it is.
It's the wording that.
No, I know what you're saying, but I think.
One of the reasons they probably want to leave that a little open-ended is this company provides maintenance for the solar panels at the wastewater treatment plant in the public safety building. They also monitor the SREC credits, and they do various other services. Now, one of the reasons they may want to leave it open-ended is if they decide they want to go ahead with another solar project, they would have the flexibility within that to negotiate what the fee would be without having to go through the whole process
That's
again.
still back on the library contract. I mean, the Historic Society contract, that's what he was
Yeah.
talking about just.
It's just the wording of that, this is the only page on this contract I hung up, and it was the exact same words as in the other contract. And on these words standing on their own, that says, we won't pay you more than the value of the services you provided. I don't see the limit that says the
Well, it's a
contract, you can't say
termination
we
provision.
provided
You're
more.
not gonna terminate them. It's just if you throw them off before the contract's done.
My whole point is there's
Yeah, it has to
nothing
be
in
read in
there
context.
that makes it clear it can't exceed the value of the contract. I'm okay, it's a couple $1,000s a year, I'm not gonna, if you're telling me that there's, the legal interpretation of this would
Yeah,
not
there's
allow
additional
someone to do that,
provisions
then that's
about
fine.
the town's limited liability and all that. There's,
All right,
Well, I think it's because even if they perform in full, it doesn't exceed the amount of the contract.
right.
And so, under no circumstances can it exceed the amount of the contract. There, if you've terminated, they only get the value, and that's why it says supportable as well, meaning they have to actually demonstrate it to us that
Right.
they incur the costs. And so we're only on the hook for the now, to your point, if they somehow say, well, the value of the services were still 100% of the contract, then you're fighting over the fact that they're saying, well, the value of our services is 100, but I think the way this is set up with an annual amount, the way it would work out, it would be cut for how much time they were on there for the most
I'm
part.
not gonna follow on my sword over this, but there is a provision in the contract for all this, all the maintenance costs, that anything that they do over and above the monitoring and the SREC reporting, it's basically, we will do that on a time and materials basis at our specified rate. So in fact, that doesn't cap the contract. It is kind of open-ended, I get it.
But we have to approve that work. They can't just go do it without our, right? I mean,
Yeah, this is, first of all, they've been on the job now.
Yeah, I'm not going after them particularly, I'm just reading contract terms and saying this seems like a whole, but I will accept it as no. You ready?
I think so.
Do you need more questions from me? I move that we approve the Selectron contract for our SREC monitoring and reporting for our 2 solar arrays owned by the town.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. The next item, we'll skip over for a second over the Senior Housing Overlay District. We did the Select Energy contract. Council on Aging, the application from Mary Roque and the Elder Resource Center for their grant application to the Foundation for Metro West for the program Making Connections, Eradicating Social Isolation in Communities. I think Ms. Roque has, I think, as I understand the program, it's connecting seniors with students, young people. And it's not, wouldn't be to the town, it would be to this private organization. And so Roberta Lynch from the Council on Aging has issued a letter of support, and Mary asked if we would consider issuing a letter of support as well. So rather than just write a letter myself, I thought we should all discuss it, so. Pete, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm fine with doing that.
I think it's great. I had a question, but I don't know if anybody in the room's gonna be able to answer it. It doesn't affect my being in favor of this, but I was curious whether Mary had done any coordination yet with the school. You know, this is a program that requires, or it's calling for young people. I'm just curious whether the schools have made any commitment to support it, or, you know, how do we actually fill in? I know Mary works on the senior side of things, and Roberta's in favor, so we've got the senior side of the equation figured out. I was just curious. It would, you know, at this point, I would not be against this. I'm actually quite for it. I just was curious whether we've actually got any commitment from the young people in the town to actually want to be involved with this.
I don't know the answer.
Nobody knows the answer.
I can ask her. I'll ask Mary.
Yeah, so-
And I'll see if, and we'll put together a letter, we can approve the language next
Okay.
week if we're in
Need a
favor of.
motion, or-
Yeah, let's get a motion.
So I move that the selectmen issue a letter of support for the grant for a program called Making Connections as requested by Mary Roque.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, Senior Housing Overlay District Revision, Senior Housing Survey results. I have a couple of thoughts on the overlay district, but if we could start with any senior housing survey results, Gus, that we have?
We don't have the survey results in terms of anything that I can really report back to you yet. I think I already told you about out of 2,200 or so households that responded, we had 694 responses. Of the 694 responses, I'm doing this off the top of my head, there was something like 431 of those responses actually were people who said they were interested, or households that said they were interested in housing. So in terms of, the one open question is, if you get about a third of the households that responded, and of that, about 60% of those have an interest in housing, does that mean 3 times that many have an interest in housing, or does it mean that the third of the households that responded are kind of a pre-selected group of people who actually care, and the other 2/3, for the most part, maybe are just more senior households that didn't care? So we do have that. Let me not just try to throw numbers out, because we have not looked at it. Dick Scolari is looking at it. Barbara Gips has indicated that she would be able to get back involved in that, in her analysis this month. And the data, the books are out there. If either of you guys want a copy of the stuff that we got, I'll be happy to make it up, and you can it's all a lot of raw data on Excel spreadsheets, but there were like 28, 30 questions, and it breaks it out by different categories, and I'll be more than happy to put 2 notebooks together for you guys if you'd like to see, just be able to, it's only the raw data, but I can get those to you if you'd like.
Yeah, I'd like to see it.
Sure.
All right, so on the senior housing overlay district, I mean, I'll give you kind of what I've been thinking about it first, and then we can talk about whether we need to wait for the survey data to come back. I mean, the question of the assisted living facilities and the CCRCs included within this, and I understand why they were included within this, and it makes sense. As I've thought about it more, I have a concern that those kinds of developments are a key part of sort of whatever the Medfield State Hospital Master Plan ends up being. I mean, most likely, that's going to be an important piece of it, and it's certainly a positive use for the land. And so my concern is if we go ahead with this and we come up with another avenue for it, we're sort of directing some of the energy or interest that developers might have in an assisted living facility or a CCRC away from the hospital. And I think for the good of the town, if something like that's going to be built in town, the first place people ought to look for that is the hospital, because we have an interest in advancing some sort of development and certainly mitigation of our risk associated with that property that those kinds of development would enhance. And so as I thought about it more from our last meeting, I had a concern that do we make it easier for a developer to go someplace else when they still might be willing to go to the hospital with that kind of development? And are we sort of setting up, competition with something that is and should be a priority for the town and focusing on development? And so I thought it worked just as well. The layout and the goal of this would work just as well without those 2 categories in it. And we would kind of stick with saying, as a policy matter for the town, if this is the kind of development you want, we really would like you to focus on putting it at the hospital. So that was kind of where I've kind of come out on that piece of it. Other than that, I think I'm okay with it. So I don't know if you have any reactions to that. And then the other question I have, Gus, is with respect to the survey, how does that factor into what we do? In other words, do we sort of report this out favorably from here or not? And then leave sort of the survey results to be incorporated in the planning board process to sort of keep the ball moving? Or should we wait to get the survey results back and then make any adjustments that we're going to make in light of the survey results? And I don't know the answer to that.
Let me try to get an answer for next week. Just shooting from the hip, I don't think there's anything in the survey results that would influence this kind of a senior overlay. There is interest in the result. The results would indicate there's interest in seniors in being close to town. There's interest in seniors being close to the senior center. There's interest in seniors being at the state hospital, so that it's not like all seniors want to be in one particular place and don't zone anything else.
Right.
I think there's some mix on formats, and part of that requires interpretation, because people don't always answer the questions quite the way you wanted. So I don't think there's automatically anything that this would do. I don't think there's anything coming out of the senior survey that would cause us to sit there and have to rip whatever we decide to do up here out.
Okay.
I, like you, and I'm particularly mindful, I'm not that experienced in zoning, so I felt, I'll learn, but I had concerns about the CRC just like you did. It's like, if that's where we want it, why are we opening it up for some theoretical possibility to go anywhere? So I'm with you on that one. I had a number of questions that were specific, and if you'll give me a minute, I can go through them, and then you at least know the feedback. Up at under the definitions, and Pete, the first one's a question for you. When we had this discussion at, I think, our last meeting, under assisted living, last line says there shall be no more than 50 beds or units within an assisted living residence. And the question I had for you, Pete, is that an economically viable limit based on the discussions we had?
I'm not an expert on assisted living. I just know that the CCRC that I was involved with
Yep.
had economic issues, challenges, when it was 160 beds.
Yeah.
And we purposely increased it to around 200 beds
Right,
to make it, the cost of administering it
right.
easier and make it more financially sound.
So coming from a pretty high level of ignorance, I looked at that number and said, this doesn't sound right to me. That's one, and,
I would, well, I just don't know enough about assisted
Okay.
living to know.
Then-
How many beds were in LCB? 78, so.
yeah, so I mean, if this definition has the effect of basically eliminating the possibility of any economically viable assisted living facility, then that's probably not a good idea. On B, the continuing care retirement, you may not have the answer to this one either. In fact, Bill, well, I should do some work on this one. The question I had around the continuing care retirement center community, it talks about townhouse multifamily, which should include an assisted living residence of not more than 50 beds and/or a skilled nursing facility or physical rehabilitation facility with not more than 100 beds. And my question is, does that work for the CCRC concept on the east side of the campus? Because that's basically saying a continuing care retirement community doesn't have more than 50 beds in the assisted living residence and not more than 100 beds in the rehab facility. So,
I mean, all I can tell you is that my experience with LaSalle Village was that it was financially problematic to have it at 150
Right.
units.
right.
And so that we made it 200. So I would
This
think that
doesn't apply
50
to
would
the
be a
hospital anyway.
challenge.
It doesn't apply to the hospital. So that's one answer is, it doesn't?
The hospital, at least as presently conceived, the hospital will have its own zoning. If you look at the map, the hospital is not in blue.
All right, so
It's
I got to get my
not
act
in,
together. Okay, all right.
The
Well, okay, so some of my questions go away because actually I was wanting to make sure that this would work okay. On the second page, item 2, the provisions of this section may be applied to lots meeting the following criteria in the RU, RTRS, and BI zoning districts unless otherwise accepted. And I asked the question, does this paragraph constrain options?
Gus, which paragraph are you in?
Second page, paragraph 2, it's actually the
Two.
part in red that was added. My only question, some of this is maybe Courtney or somebody has to answer it, but the only question I had is whether paragraph 2 as rewritten constrains any options in those 4 zones that we don't want to constrain. And yeah, that's it. And then on page 3, on the table, and I'm being mindful of some of the comments that we got from the public in the last meeting, but the CCRC is, max height is 45 feet, but then in the note at the bottom, it indicates that in the case, it basically indicates that you can have stuff beyond the maximum height restrictions enumerated above, which could be, what I was thinking of is an LCB. It's a 3-story building that I believe is 30 or 35, I think it's 35 feet high, except that when they put the screening for the HVAC stuff on the roof, That adds another 10 feet. So the maximum height of LCB is 45 feet, even though the building is something like 35 feet. This thing says the maximum height can be 45 feet, and I'm assuming that then there could be another 8 or 10 feet added on. So we're actually allowing for 53-foot buildings when people are chafing at a 45-foot height on LCB with the screens. So that it just happened, I went to the LCB hearing, that I learned that. But I wasn't sure what the rationale was, and it seemed like it was actually making it worse than what we allow with LCB.
While you're on that page, just a relatively minor, but I think it's significant, on C, up at the top, C, special permit, where you wanted to tighten up the obligation of the planning board. I'm suggesting adding the word only in the second line after may be granted. So
Where are you, Mark?
C, special permit on the second page.
Oh, okay, got it, okay. On the second line.
So
May be granted only
special-
if the.
A special permit may be granted only if the proposal meets the requirements.
Somebody had challenged Shell there at the last meeting.
Right, and she rewrote it, but I'm adding
Yep.
a more constraining word as well.
Then again, it's page 3, page 3, section F, additional requirements, small letter A. All dwellings in a senior housing residential development must be subject to an age restriction described in a deed right, or restrictive covenant, shall be reviewed by the town attorney and approved by the planning board. The question I have here is, what will this restriction look like? Is it the max age in the house? Is it the minimum age has to meet a certain? This is the issue here, and this is, I think, town council question. The issue here is if you have restricted housing and somebody has to be a particular age to be there, and you have someone who has a 75-year-old father who gets into the housing but then brings the 45-year-old child and wife and family in, because, is that the restriction? Or is the restriction the youngest person in the room, in the house, has to meet the minimum requirement? So it was just a practical question.
Those are policy and legal decisions, so there's alternatives there,
Yeah.
depending what kind of programs you may want to qualify for. I mean, as far as
So we
the
wouldn't need to
state's
specify.
concerned, their definition of age restriction would be a single adult 55 or over. You'd have to have that, but then you couldn't restrict further. Then you also have to be careful because you get into federal fair housing issues with families with children. So it all depends on the type of project that's being proposed and what programs. So that may be something that has to be kind of left loose for now and tightened up.
Okay, all right, so that kind of specificity would be associated with a particular project.
That would be something you probably address as a special permit condition.
Got it. Those are my comments. Okay.
So my only comment was that, the one that I made when we were talking about it before, which is that I would have this apply to the IE district as well, because I think that there are times that we might want to do the housing in IE, in the industrial extensive districts, and so that I think we should make it more flexible to give ourselves that opportunity.
So I'd want to understand which district, where those are, but okay. Got it.
There isn't,
Mainly West Street.
yeah, that's about it.
Sam White around there.
So think the park's in an IE district.
Actually, I think parcel 3 or whatever you,
Lot 3 is,
Lot
yeah,
3.
the Kingsbury Club. the
Well, that would be
senior
one
center.
reason why I wouldn't be in favor of it, but, Pete, the issue, let me think about it, I'm not arguing with you yet. The reason it gives me pause is that this town has more land for residential development than it does for commercial development. So the things that make it easier for the town not to develop commercially makes it harder for the town to diversify the tax base. If we were out of land for housing, I'd feel differently, but when we're not out of land for housing, and what land we do have that's for commercial has actually been eroded through things like the park, which is a good project, but it's basically taking land out. I don't get the real compelling reason why we want, I don't know why we'd want to put a house somewhere around Sam White's location unless we just want to build some houses there, and then people get upset about the industrial activity all around them, so we can squeeze out the industrial activity. If there's other places that we can develop, I don't know why we're in a rush to do that, that's all.
So my issue with it is that I think that I don't see the town necessarily wanting a lot of industrial, commercial development. I think people live here because they like the residential nature of the town. If we can reduce the property taxes, which I think is the real issue, not how much commercial development we have, it's how much we pay in property taxes. And my strategy has gotten to be that if we build the right type of housing, that can assist us in reducing the property taxes for the big residential property tax base. The old Village Square project, I think Ralph Costello gave me the figure of 600,000 in taxes, which probably sounds right per year. When I talked to him the last time, one school child living in that, so that's a profit to the town of 550,000 a year. I think that the type of housing that we're talking about building for seniors is also going to be revenue positive for the town. The analysis that Kathy McCabe did on the Lot 3 project showed that the property taxes coming in from a residential development far exceeded the commercial property tax return to the town. So I don't think, I guess I don't want to argue in favor of commercial uses specifically for purposes of having a glass crushing facility in town. I would like to argue in favor of the town getting more money for the use of its land, for the use of its property, in order to reduce the property taxes as much as we can. And what I've personally, I've been trying to figure out how to reduce the property tax base for all the years that I've been a selectman. And I finally decided that we're just having trouble luring businesses here, but that we really have people that want to live here, and that can be our business if we structure the housing correctly.
So you haven't sold me on the argument, Pete, because there are places where we can do, you've sold me on the argument that you can put up housing developments like what Ralph put up on South Street that are not net drains on the town. I get that.
Yeah.
But again, I go back to saying, I'm not sold on the idea that we should just not have any diversified development in town other than residential. And in particular, given that there's not a critical shortage of land that you could build houses on, I don't see the compelling need to do that. So this is a philosophical discussion that's going to go.
I mean, what we have in town
Like
is
this.
single-family homes in spades. We don't need any more single-family homes. But there are types of housing that we don't have in town that it would help to have. And those are the sorts of housing that the seniors are really looking for.
I mean, just looking at the map and the parcels we're talking about, I mean, I think there are enough parcels covered within the two districts within the districts that would be included within this overlay district or within the zoning classifications that would be included within the zoning district to get us to a good start, right? And I think if we got to the point where somehow we were out of space here, to Gus's point, we could expand it. But looking at the map, I don't see a lack of options. And some of those options are on bigger roads. It's kind of a mix of land that's on larger roads and kind of out in the...
And a lot of these options are not really options. I mean, I think that land along Bridge Street down to the river that's probably all owned by the Army Corps of Engineers, and that's all unbuildable in any event, because it's all Rivers Act and wetlands and... I'm not sure what this big tract here is, for instance, but I don't know if that's the Holmquist land or something of that sort.
I don't know what that is. It's off of Spring Street, before South Street.
You have that map?
But if it's the Holmquist land, then, that's not gonna be usable.
Isn't that on the other side, though?
Holmquist is on that side of
I thought
27.
it was on the... Because doesn't it back up into Wheelock? The Holmquist land?
Some of the Holmquist land does back up to Wheelock. It's fields.
It's the other side of the railroad tracks. So it'd
I
be,
mean, Wilkins Glen is, I think that's what this
Don't
one
have
here
it in
is.
there.
Part of that
Wilkins
is, and
Glen.
part of it's the abutting property.
I don't know. I mean, I spent time trying to figure out what these different parcels were, and not a lot of them jumped out at me as being really very usable.
I think you ought to be careful, what is it, the law of unintended consequences? I think you need to, I agree with you, people, that you should start small and find out how it works and concentrate on the state hospital before you start going all over town, and then some developer with a sharp zoning attorney figures a way to get around the
Well,
rules.
but Mike,
and
it's all,
comes up
it's
with
all
something.
special permit. I mean, this has been set up in a way that the town has the ultimate yes or no determination as to whether it happens. The town gets to decide whether it's in the town's interest or not. We're not creating an opening for someone to come in and just scoop us here. We get the final say.
One would hope, but with the way lawsuits come down these days and the way the courts are ruling, you never know.
What I like about what the town's done, I'm not sure if it was foresight or it just happened, but, and we both live up at the end that we're talking about here, so it's not like we're just saying, let's keep the other end of town in commercial or industrial, but the area that we have over on West Mill going across North Meadows, yeah, we lost the park, but that collective area is not interspersed with housing. I mean, it's meaningful to me that on Ice House Road, part of the discussion around Lot 3, which was bought to provide commercially developable land when we went to the taxpayers and asked them for it, one of the arguments against developing it is because, well, now there's the center is there and we don't want the traffic. So as soon as you start building houses in an industrial zone, it's kind of like people that move in close to airports. Suddenly, once they're there, oh, we don't like the noise, we need to get rid of that. So we have an area which is not particularly intrusive on anybody's house, and there's space to expand there. It's like one way or the other, we seem to actually been pretty thoughtful about where to put that land that's appropriate for industrial. There's still plenty of room to build the housing. And again, if I thought we were out of room, then I'd listen. But right now, it's like this just doesn't seem to be the right thing to do. Take that possibility off the table. So we're going to continue to disagree on that one, Pete. But I'll go with Mike on it, that we try to get this in place first with where it's at and then see how it works. And
where do you two come down on taking out the assisted living and the continuing care from this?
I don't necessarily care about doing that one way or the other. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I'm reminded of a discussion that Mike Sullivan and I had maybe 10, 15 years ago when the Bear property was up for sale, and Mike didn't want to rezone it for retail and mixed use because of it would compete against the hospital development. I mean, it's the same argument. So I don't know if that's going to actually happen. But I don't know that I'm
I think we're
that
gonna-
worried about it. I don't think we're going to end up with a ton of assisted living and CCRCs. in
I don't
town.
either. My concern, though, is that if we're going to have one, we should take a shot to have it at the hospital. Right. I mean, and look, if at some point, you know, look, if the hospital's a dead letter in 2 years, we can amend this to add it back in and do it at that point, but that would be my view. So do you object to taking it out? or-
I don't object, no. I guess I'd leave it in, but if you feel strongly about it, I'm fine to go along with it. I think it's going to be hard to find a CCRC and assisted living site in town, given this
Yeah.
definition.
Yeah, I agree, and I think so. We're probably not costing ourselves that much in whatever we're doing in terms of getting people to focus, getting developers to focus on the hospital and not trying to piece together parcels to put one someplace else, because they think that'll happen sooner than whatever's going to happen at the hospital, so.
Can I clarify, are you looking at the version that has it as assisted living facilities, CCRCs, that are allowable in the RU and DI?
Yes.
Okay, so keep that.
No, we want to take it out entirely.
Oh, okay.
Just have it not be part of the overlay district.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And then otherwise, are we comfortable passing this on to the planning board, and we'll provide the planning board with the, and Gus, you can give Sarah, sorry, you came in, I
Yeah.
didn't know, just a few minutes.
Sarah, I'll give you these comments if you'd like. I'm not smart enough to know the right answers. I only know how to ask dumb questions, and so these are my dumb questions. Okay.
Mr. Massaro. Get the man a microphone.
I had asked this question last week, so I haven't seen a new version of the plan or anything else, but and I'm not sure what Courtney's answer was, but I asked about inclusionary affordability requirements, and if they were going to be the same as the current bylaw in town. And I didn't see anything obviously in the earlier version about inclusionary zoning. I mean, optimistically, I would say it's because the town bylaw applies to it, but I was just curious as to whether you were going to add something in here about it or not.
Trying to remember what her answer was. Did she mention that?
By the way, I raised the same question with the Master Planning Committee because they had numbers that were originally different from what was
Are you
in.
specifically talking about in assisted living facilities?
No, that question, that was again one of my comments last time also, was that it was unlikely that we were going to get credit for anything but this was, what about the rest of the units? Do the inclusionary zoning as enacted in the town bylaw apply to, this overlay district?
Yes, I think the answer was yes, if it was multi-family development, but no if the lots were single-family lots. Like the cottages were all on their own lot. That is excluded from the inclusionary.
There was no change made in this that addressed that issue, Bill.
So I'm curious as to why it's not in the single.
The grandfather themselves some zoning
This
changes.
came up when we were proposing the bylaw, was in 2017, and Mark can speak probably better to the case law.
Yeah, I'm
Sure,
sorry,
so
yeah.
sorry, yeah. Where there were some issues with subdivisions and single-family house lots as opposed to multifamily developments. Can you take it from there?
Yeah, the prevailing wisdom is that because developers have a right to develop with subdivisions, it's an as-of-right situation with residential subdivisions under the subdivision control law. As long as you comply with the rules and regulations, you have a right to the subdivision. And therefore, to impose a inclusionary zoning in that situation would raise constitutional issues of due process. So you can do it as a incentive base, but you can't do it mandatory imposed on what would otherwise be a normal subdivision, residential subdivision.
Now, this is strictly single-family, you're saying single-family home, ownership of single-family home.
Right. Traditional residential.
So typically then, a duplex condo, similar to Hospital Road. What about a single-family in that kind of a development?
That is considered multifamily.
Okay.
Singles and duplexes as part of an overall development.
All right.
They're all on one lot, actually, which is what
Yes.
makes it multifamily.
All right, again, I just want to make sure that, we're applying this consistently across, across the town.
Yeah, there could be a scenario where you'd have multiple cottages on one lot, but you could have another scenario where each lot
Okay.
is
All right,
subdivided.
okay.
All right, thank you.
And Sarah, the comments that refer to the hospital disregard, I hadn't appreciated that the overlay wasn't extended to the hospital, so there's a couple of questions there that are not actually relevant.
Okay.
Great. All right, so let's move on. We've gone through the action items. We can do the Barbara Layton Day later. But let's move on to the discussion with Christine about the town administrator position, which
I'm
was,
sorry to interrupt. So the Board of Selectmen are instructing the planning board to go ahead and hold the public hearings.
and review this and do what the planning board does.
Okay, great, thank you.
Whatever it is they do when they have their meetings, they should do those things that the planning board typically does.
Recognizing that the comments we made here about changes, those should get worked in as
Right.
well.
Right, the CCRC and the assisted living should come out of the overlay district. All right, Christine?
So one of the things I wanted to talk about is just give a little bit of background. I know it seems like I've been here forever, and just part of your meeting, so. I actually came to work in Medfield back in 1999. I started as a town planner before I came to Medfield. And the reason why I was chosen as Mike's assistant was because I had a planning background. But the role of the assistant town administrator was not defined, other than they wanted somebody as a planning background. And I have been incredibly lucky for the past 20 years working for Mike, in that he assigned me numerous special projects with hands-on learning. Most of my fellow assistant town administrators are incredibly jealous of the experience that I've had, because their town administrators would never give them control of collective bargaining, control of setting up an IT department. When we needed sewers, nobody knew how to do the sewer betterments. And so they came to me and said, can you create the spreadsheets to develop the sewer betterments? Sure. I had no idea what a sewer betterment was at the time. So numerous projects like this were handed to me. I researched them. We accomplished them. We did them. And when I say I on all of these, know that there is a full team of my staff behind me, assisting me on these. One of the things that I've been able to do over almost 20 years working on these projects is be exposed to different types of budgeting. And I know that's been an issue and a discussion as to my experience with budgeting. So just to highlight a few things, obviously it's too much to go into for the whole thing, but I've been solely responsible for helping develop the capital budget for the past 15 years with the Capital Budget Committee. I'm responsible for costing out all of the collective bargaining agreements and determine what the town can and cannot afford in negotiating with both the police union and the fire union. I work with the personnel board every year to determine what will be the annual cost of living. What can Medfield absorb for their non-union employees for cost of living? And that includes working through merit increases for department heads as well. Operationally, I'm very involved in the budget. I developed the town administrator budget, both operation-wise and salary-wise. Recently, we created 2 new departments. We created an IT department and a facilities department. They had 0 budget when we started, and Mike said, figure out how we're going to fund these. So it was my job to go through all of the budgets in town and determine how to fund those departments and work with department heads, which was probably the most interesting project, to explain to them why I was taking money from their budget for a new budget. But all of those have given me a good foundation operationally of the budget. I don't sit with Mike when he sets the tax rate, but that's just one task in this whole budget process, I think. And just because I haven't done that task doesn't mean I'm not capable of doing that task. But with the division of labor, there's a lot of work that Mike and I handle, and Mike handles that piece of it. But again, in almost 20 years of being here, I've never turned down a task, and I don't plan to now.
So just before we get into kind of questions and discussions, do you have any kind of initial thoughts on kind of going forward, sort of your view? I mean, to a certain extent, the town administrator has a set of responsibilities that are defined by the town charter, and then the rest is kind of everything else that comes up, right? And so defined to a certain extent by the selectmen or otherwise. So do you have any initial thoughts as you think going forward as to the position and how you see it being set up and seeing the departments being set up and kind of government being organized around the TA position?
I think I would take a similar approach that Mike took almost 20 years ago in choosing an assistant town administrator. I would choose somebody with a solid demonstrated financial background to oversee the financial team. I can't say enough about how strong your financial team is, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't have somebody overseeing between me and them. I also think there are other opportunities for restructuring how the town administrator position would work and the delegation of duties. I think one of the issues maybe is I have absorbed a lot of tasks over the 20 years that have been assigned to me because either nobody else wanted to do them or nobody else knew how to do them. So some of those would need to be reassigned to different departments. And in speaking to them over the last 6 weeks talking about this, they're more than welcome to take on some of those projects.
Pete, do you want to start with questions or?
Sure. So I guess the first thing that I guess I would think about asking you about is what sort of changes you would envision seeing and how you would be what you would do the same as Mike or what you would do differently.
I think one of the great things having worked for Mike is to see the things that work. And Mike and I talk obviously on a constant basis, and he knows the things I would change. And one of the biggest ones is I would hold monthly department head meetings. Right now, we meet with department heads on a daily basis. For instance, I met with Dr. Marsden today. I had the police chief in my office, the fire chief on daily. But it doesn't give the opportunity for the department heads to meet with each other. And there are certain department heads who are in different buildings, such as Park and Rec and Council on Aging, who may not have the same access to the department heads at the town hall or the police station or the fire station. So I think my biggest change would be monthly department head meetings.
Any other sorts of changes that you could think of that you would
I'd like to
implement?
I'd like to continue working with Dr. Marsden on some job sharing. We've been very successful with IT and facilities. But I think human resources is definitely a position that it doesn't need to be created for both the school and the town side. It's something that can be shared and done for both.
Yeah, I know there was a time when we were talking about maybe the financial component being shared, but I guess that doesn't work apparently.
I think we need to think more progressively. I think other towns are starting to do that. When I hear Millis is doing it and Harvard's doing it, I think it's something we need to take a look at. And if we're looking, if I was chosen for the position and needed to fill the assistant town administrator position, I think Dr. Marsden and I could have a conversation about whether or not that's an opportunity.
So, and how about in terms of getting information out of the townhouse to the people, the residents? I guess that's one of the things that that's why I started a blog, was to try to push information out of the townhouse that I saw to people.
I think it's one of the things we've started. Having the new website obviously has made some of that information easier to access, but I think there's some significant changes we can make to move that even more forward. We had a second round of training for our department heads on the website, and it was very clear to me we're only using about 20% of the capacity, and there's significant more things we can do to make everybody's life easier with some online permitting.
All the software that I use every day to do my job, I think of how little of the capacity that I'm really using, just because I don't know how.
But the department heads have been very receptive. Most are using the website, and they're very interested in, it makes their life easier to be able to offer the residents the ability to fill forms out online and send them in electronically rather than visit the town hall. So
We'd have a lot happier residents if they could do all their business online. How, do the department heads do their own portion of the website at this point, or?
They do. A significant number of them
At one point, you
do.
were doing a lot of that for everybody.
A lot of them have taken that over since we went to the new website, which makes it much easier for them to manage.
Excellent. In terms of bringing information to the Board of Selectmen, would you be looking to get us more information? I mean, one of the things that I guess I'd like to have more regular reports from the Mo Goulet. One of the first things he did when he came here was he sent a memo to the selectmen with a list of things that he was going to be working on. I mean, I found that very refreshing. I liked getting that, and I wouldn't mind getting that from the police, the fire, and other groups in town as well.
I don't think that's an issue at all.
And getting, I'd like statistics even on what the departments are doing, actually.
Most of them are giving Mike or I that information on an informal basis, so there's no reason why they couldn't write it up in a formal basis and send it on to the selectmen.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. Any ideas about how to manage the state hospital process, since that's such a big part of our future?
I laugh about the state hospital process because when I started here, that was one of the reasons I do. Because one of the reasons I was hired was to manage the state hospital process, and that was a very long time ago. And at the time, I was told it would be coming, it was on the horizon. And I remember when I went out on my first maternity leave, I was so upset because I was going to miss what was going to happen at the state hospital. He's going to be a sophomore in high school.
That's why they delayed it.
They're still waiting for me.
Yeah, they're waiting for the college.
Most of the people that I've worked on the state hospital project with have retired, at DCAM. So It's something that I think is easy to forget is really here now, because for 20 years, it's been, well, it's coming, we'll do that at the state hospital. Like you mentioned a few minutes ago, we didn't do something 15 years ago because the state hospital might be coming up. I think this time it's really here.
I think so too.
And I think forming the development committee and doing an RFI we're heading in the right direction.
So when I was at LaSalle College on their Board of Trustees, I ended up working on the LaSalle Village Board of Trustees, and I did that for about 10, 12 years, and I always thought that my major task on that Board of Trustees was to keep the college president from quitting, because he was someone who was so talented that running a small college was not of enough interest to him. But building the LaSalle Village project really interested him, and he grabbed that and he took it and he ran with it. And so that, so that some town administrators would really welcome the project at the state hospital and some wouldn't. Is it something that you want to be in control of or not?
I think after 19 years waiting for something to happen at the state hospital, I'm fine seeing it through to the end.
Yeah. Well, it's not just seeing it through, but whether or not you really want to be the person pushing on it and leading us on it, I guess.
I think with the development committee in place and the staff we have in place, we can move it forward.
Yeah, okay, good. Yeah. Those are, I think, the main things that I'm thinking of.
Gus?
Just have a couple. If you were to define or describe the job of the town administrator as you've come to understand it since 1999, how would you describe it?
I would say the town administrator is a generalist. They have a broad knowledge of all the departments. And you need to have that broad knowledge of all the departments, because I have to know, is DPW being successful? Is the assessor's office working as efficiently as it should? And I think the charter outlines the role of the town administrator, but for me, the role of the town administrator is to listen to the people, and whether that is the Board of Selectmen, whether it's the residents in town, or as the leader of the staff and the department heads, that's the most important role of the town administrator.
Had another question on this. This kind of has to do with background, or you're just asking comments on your background, but I think in the time that I've worked with the town, when I think of Mike and what things he did, that I came to realize the importance of and appreciate the slowest, was the issue around keeping track of things like revenue, being aware of what's going on at the state level from a revenue standpoint, being able to handicap that and not only know what the cost side and the operation side is, but also being able to, test the wind. And I think from the time I was on the warrant committee to include the time I've been on the Board of Selectmen, I've come to respect Mike's conservative but reliable projections. Have you had a chance, or have you done any of that up till now?
I haven't done any of the long-term forecasting.
Okay.
I think that the Department of Revenue has taken a lot of what Michael does and put it into models for the towns to use. I know some of our financial team has started to use that. I know you've referenced some of it. We had a meeting with the Department of Revenue the other day, and speaking to your point, it was a very short meeting, maybe about 20 minutes, and no less than 6 times during that meeting, they said, Medfield's not a town we worry about. Nope, Medfield's not an issue. And I think, we would need to keep that, we need to keep that impression of ourselves.
And I was also curious about your perspective as a town administrator. How do you see yourself working with the state reps? It could be Mass Municipal, it could be a lot of different, but if you were to think about which outside contacts, how you think about them, which ones are most important, what would you do? What shows up on the radar screen?
I think a healthy relationship with our reps are good. I check in with them now. I talk to Denise Garlick's chief of staff on a regular basis. I think it's important to stay active in the MMA. I think it's important to know what other cities and towns are doing. It's also important, I think, Mike and I disagree on this, to be involved in the International City Managers Association to see what's happening on the national level as well. So I would push a heavier presence for us in those organizations.
Mike goes to some sort of meetings of town administrators. Do you go to those as well?
Normally, we don't both attend those. There's the Metro West Suburban Managers Meeting. I sit on the Mass Municipal Personnel Association, so I attend those meetings. But usually we find it's better for us to divide and conquer, and we can go to more things and bring them back to each other.
Yeah, so, but if Mike's not able to go to one of those, do you go to
Yes.
his place? Yep, good.
And I actually have an assistant town administrator's suburban group that we meet for coffee once a month.
Another question, if you were to gaze into your crystal ball and think about the town of Medfield, what do we've had a lot of things that have, obviously a lot of things going on in the last couple of years, a lot of changes happening. Medfield's always changing, but if you were to look ahead and think about Medfield, what do you see as our, over the next 5 to 10 years, what would you see as the challenges that bubble to the top for you, and what the town faces, not what you personally necessarily face, but the town's challenges?
I think there are 3 issues. One is the Medfield State Hospital, and that obviously is moving it forward quicker than we have. I think our health insurance costs are one of the biggest problems we have, and we've talked significantly that it is one of the biggest drivers of our budget. I think we need to be creative. One of the things I've been talking about with some of the other managers is offering an incentive to employees who are currently on the insurance plan to come off, and you pay them a yearly stipend, which is significantly less than what we pay for their insurance. The town of Northborough and Southborough have had some success with that to reduce their costs. I think we need to work with the Insurance Advisory Committee on our plan choosing to reduce the cost on that. And one of the other things is the Pay Equity Act, which began July 1st of 2018. And as we have to start looking at our positions based on gender, both in the school and the town, other towns are a little ahead of us on this, and they're raising their department head and their hourly rates to compensate for that. And some of our department heads are being lured away. We saw that with the building department. So I think it's something we need to start looking at with the personnel board to address, and what our plan is for keeping those department heads that are key to our operation.
One last question. What's the biggest weakness you're going to have to deal with as a town administrator? Your personal what's the thing as you look at the job and your preparedness to do it, what's the thing that pops to the top of your list on what you're going to have to work on the most?
I think it is doing the long-term forecasting and doing your first tax levy limit. But I have a lot of trust in the financial team. I trust that I will find an assistant town administrator with a good financial background and be able to do that successfully.
A few questions. From an overall kind of personnel management standpoint, do you see any changes in personnel evaluations or contracts, or kind of the way we handle our department heads, the way we handle our personnel? I know we typically have not had contracts for a lot of our department heads, for our town administrator, and that's something we've got to talk about whether that's going to continue or not. But do you have thoughts about that at the staff level, and how that might work going forward?
I do. So there are only certain department heads you can have contracts with. Right now, we don't have contracts with any of them. We have letters of agreement. But I think both for your protection and my protection, we should talk about a contract for the town administrator's position. I also think we need to start doing evaluations, both for department heads, management, and hourly. And I don't necessarily need those to be tied to compensation, but it's not fair to our employees to not know where they stand, to let issues build where they get to a point where you're concerned about whether or not you can retain somebody, and they have no idea you've been unhappy with them for the last 10 years. So I think it's only fair to start doing an evaluation process for everyone involved in the town.
With respect to kind of planning issues in the town, a lot of attention, I think, is paid to planning issues. I mean, a lot of excitement in town comes around planning issues, and we really have a planning staff of one person, right? And so in terms of a mismatch between kind of the level of complexity that arises and the staffing that we have, obviously we have a very capable town planner, but we have one town planner in the singular. But at the same time, I don't know that we should be looking to increase our staffing. I mean, do you see ways to kind of look at reallocation of the number of personnel that we have to kind of meet the issues that we have today, kind of meet the concerns, to make sure that where the work really is, that's where the personnel is focused?
I think that if you did promote me to town administrator, you're going to need somebody to do the day-to-day HR, which is where I'd work with Dr. Marsden to see if we could merge that person, which would free up from having to hire a person to actually manage the personnel on the town side, and that could be used for planning. I also think we have the opportunity to look at all of our departments, particularly land use, and I think we should create a land use department that has multiple departments. Right now, the Board of Health and the Conservation Commission, I consider orphan departments. They don't have a department head to report to. They do have committees to report to, but there's no structure reporting for a department head on staff. So sometimes we found that the department heads may not be up to date on what's happening in those departments while the committees are. So I think creating a new reporting structure or a new department like that would be helpful.
I mean, what do you, from a financial perspective, I mean, apart from the mechanics of the preparation of the budget, just thinking strategically, sort of what do you see as kind of the major task for the town over the next 5 years and looking strategically at our financial position and the issues that we're facing?
I think given the confidence that the voters placed in us doing the overrides, that's not something we can continue to count on a yearly basis. I think we made that commitment to them, that that's not something we're going to ask for. But I also don't want their confidence in us to be confused with their willingness to give the town overrides on an annual basis also. So I think we need to be very careful on how we manage that trust.
Mm-hmm. And how do you see the town administrator, in your role as town administrator, interacting with the school department? And I think in looking at different towns, the relationship differs. I think over time here, I think Mike generally has had a good relationship with the school department. It's been different when there's been different people running the schools, and I think it's been pretty positive with Dr. Marsden. But how do you see that generally? I mean, because obviously there's a lot of statutory authority vested in the school committee. But from your perspective, how does the town administrator interact with the school department?
I think Mike's done a great job, and one of the smartest decisions he ever made was putting the school department in the town hall. We work with them on a daily basis. We're incredibly lucky. Most towns, the superintendent and the town administrator see each other maybe twice a year at a retirement party and at town meeting. We're different. I mean, when I got back from vacation on Monday, the first thing I did was check in with Evelyn, then Mike. I saw the financial team on the first floor, and then I went and sat in Dr. Marsden's office for half an hour to figure out what had gone on since I've been gone for the week. So I'd like to continue that relationship. I think we need to work together. We need to stop the turf war between schools and town. It's all taxpayer dollars, and we need to use it judiciously for all of us.
Do you see any other, I mean, you mentioned HR, do you see any other areas for either consolidation or reorganization between town departments? Either, combining school and town or combining existing town departments into a different mix?
I think, as you know, I support the appointed town clerk position. I'm concerned that we have a department that's so customer service oriented that does not report to either the town administrator or the Board of Selectmen. We recently, and through no fault of her own, the department has, the town clerk's allowed to take vacation, but the office was essentially closed for 2 weeks. And Carol was very good about coming back, but it's also not fair to her to have to come back on her vacation either. I think we have departments that we have automated that have lightened their workloads, and we need to look at where those positions could be reallocated. And I also think we need to look at a building and grounds department. I was part of the process when we originally had the DPW doing building and grounds. Then we went out to a private contractor. Then we hired Brian Schools for Parks and Recreation. And we've added more and more to Brian's plate into Parks and Recreation, which I don't think is fair, because we're very frustrated. Take the public safety building. We installed landscaping that requires a bit of maintenance. 2 weeks ago, I drove by, and the fire chief's out there weeding the front lawn. That's not okay. We have a beautiful pocket park, and the front of the town hall does not look fantastic. I think we need to figure out, and it may cost us some money, but we need to figure out the best way to manage building and grounds for everybody, including Roberta. She may have mentioned it to me today.
Peter Guest, do you have further questions or comments? All right, we'll take any questions, comments, input from public. I know Mike was here. Mike has left. I don't know if Mike is coming back, if he's going to weigh in at all. But anybody have any questions,
I was
comments?
afraid that Christine was going to throw him under the bus.
Mel Siebold, you need a microphone before you can speak, sir, even though we have no trouble hearing you, but for everybody at home.
I've been a Park and Rec Commissioner for 10 years, and the experience, I can speak for myself, I would certainly speak for our director. The experience we've had with Christine has been nothing but positive. She's helped us hire a director, a program coordinator. She's been very helpful with ethical issues, conflict of interest issues that have arisen over the past 10 years that I've been here. And I would think she's already an asset to the town, and I would think that she would continue to be if she were promoted.
Thank you, Mel. Oh, we're just returning the microphone. All right.
We thought there was a ground.
I can breathe now.
Christine, do you have anything else you want to add, and then we'll kind of discuss what we do from here?
I just think that, my work ethic over the last 19 years, stands on its own. I've never turned down a project. Medfield has always been my priority in getting the job done, and I would anticipate continuing that as well.
Certainly echo that in my experience. So procedurally, Gus and Pete, I think a couple of things I think we need to talk amongst ourselves when this is, put it on for an agenda item, if, we want to go ahead with Christine. And then we have to schedule an executive session as well to talk contract terms, and all the rest of it. Do we want to put that on for next week, or do we want to put it on for September, or what do you want to do? In terms of the actual, we didn't have on the agenda for, any kind of appointment or decision.
Put it on next week.
Next week, okay. We'll put that on for next week. We'll put an executive session at the end.
We have one at the beginning next week, 6 o'clock.
Conservation Commission.
I don't know if we'll be able to cover it all in.
Yeah, I'm thinking you're right.
At least we have the agenda for the executive session. That way we can discuss it in open session, go to executive session, and then come out for next week. Great. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming in for the interview.
And you get to stay as well. Licenses and permits, consent agenda. Any objections to any items on the consent agenda?
No.
No, they're fine.
A motion.
I move that we approve the requests on the consent agenda.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
All right, we have Barbara Layton. And a request to proclaim August 20th, 2018 as Barbara Layton Day in Medfield. And Gus, do you want to read the proclamation, or should we just have a motion?
I think it's only appropriate to read the proclamation.
Okay.
I'm moving that we approve sign the proclamation.
Yes.
And
reading-
declare the day.
And
Yes?
declare the
Okay.
day.
I move that we declare August 20th, 2018 as Barbara Layton Day, and vote to sign the proclamation that reads as follows. We should get Mike in here. He should have to read the stuff that he writes. Whereas on August 20th, 1918, Barbara Layton was born in Medfield to Newell and Myra Spofford Layton during the presidential tenure of Woodrow Wilson, a year which saw the election of Calvin Coolidge as governor of Massachusetts, the worldwide Spanish flu epidemic, and continued American engagement in World War I, and whereas she grew up attending the old Ralph Wheelock Elementary School on Pleasant Street and the Hannah Adams Pfaff High School, the Pfaff Center, where she was one of 20 graduates with the class of 1936. And whereas for over half a century, Barbara was a member and curator of the Medfield Historical Society, sharing her wealth of knowledge of the town's past and recent history with local residents, visitors, and historians, overseeing numerous events at the Peak House, including the annual pantry sale, archaeological digs, many critical maintenance projects, and serving as a guide and hostess for visitors. She also worked with middle school students each year to complete their research projects and spent numerous Saturdays at the Historical Society building presenting and explaining the Society's collection to visitors. And whereas Barbara Layton was a charter member and historian of the Grist Mill Committee, researching its operations, laboring to clear out the Clark Kingsbury Grist Mill, Nantasket Brook, and the surrounding lands, and restoring the mill to its past state, ensuring that the restoration was as accurate as possible, and whereas she was always present at the Sawmill Brook sixth grade archaeological digs known as the Never-Ending Dig, lending her expertise and her considerable shovel power to the annual enterprise, and whereas Barbara demonstrated to younger generations the value of a self-sufficient lifestyle, hunting, fishing, chopping wood, and tapping maple trees, reveling in nature and in the outdoors that so typifies Medfield, and donating a parcel of land off Rocky Lane to the town. And whereas she was an avid reader and a staunch supporter of the Memorial Public Library and worked with the town clerk and the Historical Commission to protect and preserve town records and other important historical documents. Therefore, now be it resolved that on the centennial of her birth, we, the Board of Selectmen of the town of Medfield, do officially proclaim August 20th, 2018 to be Barbara Layton Day, and ask the citizens of Medfield to join with us in honoring her numerous contributions to the town of Medfield. Signed, sealed, and delivered on this 14th day of August 2018 at Medfield in the county of Norfolk, Massachusetts. Michael T. Marcucci, Chairman. Gustav H. Murphy, Clerk. Osler L. Peterson, Third Member, Board of Selectmen.
Do we have a second?
Here, here, second.
Do we have a second?
Yes.
All in favor?
Yep.
Aye. That's a proclamation right there.
The Historical Society is asking people to mail her birthday cards.
Okay.
They want to get as many birthday cards as she can possibly get in her house. And her birthday's obviously the 20th, so her address is going to be out there too. So.
Okay.
So you're going to publish that to let people
Yeah, it's
know?
already on
Okay.
the page.
Okay, so check out the patch for the address to send
Yeah.
Barbara.
It's four, isn't it 4 Robert Sproul?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Excellent. Well, that's wonderful. That's great. Christine, you gotta write proclamations like that. It was the time to make it. That's-
Yeah, we didn't
I should have said, that's gonna, forget the budget, that's the hardest part.
Maybe we should have had Christine read this thing, just to make sure she has the stentorian voice that you need to speak on behalf of the town.
I know somebody.
That's right.
I know somebody retiring I can hire out. to-
Right. Excellent. All right, Board of Selectmen goals.
How do you want to proceed on this? I think I gave you my comments from before, or I gave you the update on this, I think, but we never actually went through a discussion of the items.
Did not go through a discussion of the items. And I couldn't remember, it wasn't whether, because it wasn't in our packet, whether there was,
I passed them out last.
I know you did, I didn't know if there was a further
There was not. You want a copy?
coming.
I have an extra
I think I have it.
copy.
I think I have it. Assuming I took the right folder, I should have it. Yeah, I have it here. So I think the question was for the items in the back, right?
I have questions all the way through these goals, but we could start at the back, yeah.
Okay, well, all right, well, maybe I misunderstood the color coding then.
The color coding was intended to represent who of the three of us added that particular thing.
Ah, okay.
So if you
So I'm-
recognize
I'm
something
red.
you've added, that's your color. Pete's red, you're blue.
Gus is
I'm-
yellow.
Okay. All right, do you want to go through them then?
You want to start from the front?
We might as well start from the
Sure,
front
okay.
then.
And Pete, do you have, maybe we'll just work our way through, and anybody with comments, I have comments on, let me start, but I'm guessing we want to process the comments for each set. The first one around 2018-19 goals, against the first bullet, maintain a responsible fiscally prudent financial position. My only comment there is those two versions of that goal should probably be turned into a single goal. I think both Pete and I were saying the same thing, just differently. So
Okay.
that's,
Yeah.
I think, a single goal.
Yeah.
The next one down, I carried, the ones that are not highlighted were the goals that we started off with when we were drafting these a year ago. I left them in there, and then I added those. So Mike, you had three here, the first two, the townwide master plan and the ways to extend the downtown business district, I just checked off, those made sense to me. The last one, the work with the town planner to identify parcels of land that could be rezoned as commercial and present recommendations to the planning board, I think that's a goal that maps onto the three that we had before. So we need to reconcile. My comment was, I think that goal needs to be more concrete on what we have in mind here. The questions I had was, is this in addition to the state hospital? Second, what is the commercial demand we're trying to address? So when we talk about rezoning something, why are we, what's the driver, what specifically we're trying to accomplish? So I wasn't against doing it, I just saw it as kind of an action without me at least having a clear understanding of what the purpose behind the action was, so.
Sure, so, it does not include the state hospital.
Okay.
The hospital
Okay.
is separate from that. I think the idea being, we had, the Legion parcel is obviously one that comes to mind.
Okay.
That, obviously, we had struggled to attract commercial development to the town. And I think one of the reasons for that is a lot of what would be our prime commercial spot is residential. Right, so really where we've seen kind of growth and businesses that have come in and are thriving are businesses that are closer to the downtown, sort of on the major roads, and are patronized by people who live in town. So we've had a lot of successful restaurants, we've had different stores that have seemed to have done pretty well because they are used by the people in the town. And we have land that's zoned if a significant, I don't know, Pete mentioned the glass crushing business, or I don't know, the glass, but, we have land that's zoned for that.
That was an actual proposal
Yeah.
for the lot 1, 2, and 3 up
Right.
off on Ice House Road.
Right, but I mean, there's not that much we can do to attract those kind of businesses. They're gonna find it attractive or not, but I think there were spots, the Legion's been highlighted recently, that really, to me, is a good commercial spot, and it's on a visible corner, and so, are there places like that? Another place is Park Street, right? You walk around the downtown, looking for, there's a couple of lots on Park Street where you could see somebody having an idea, okay, it's visible, it's close to the downtown, what can we do to kind of extend that downtown business district? Because that's kind of what's been more successful of late, rather than kind of the bigger things kind of that are tucked away.
I mean, Randy's service station is on residentially zoned land, which is kind of odd, given the usage, but
Yeah, so
it
that
just
was- that was
predated
the-
zoning probably.
It seemed like a cheap way, without spending taxpayer dollars, at least providing some more options to,
I would
a
guess
concrete
that-
step we could take to promote commercial development.
I would guess that the Legion is probably already zoned for commercial
It's
use.
zoned to RS,
Oh, it's RS?
it's in the RS.
That was a spot zone down there.
Huh.
We actually expanded it on the other side of the street where Rick's formerly was. When the hardware store came in, I believe we expanded the zoning down there in that area.
Yeah, so it's an RS where it is.
Okay. So that makes sense to me. That's good. Second page, the only point again was in that first bullet at the top, those two, both Pete's and my statement are kind of trying to say the same thing. So we
Yep.
probably want to consolidate that into a single goal, and obviously I was okay with that. And I was also okay with Pete's second goal around completing the townwide master plan. It's a little bit of mapping. If we have one goal that says we're going to have the townwide master plan, then we say we complete it, there may be some redundancy. But
Right, so my comment on that, I think, I agree with the idea of working with the downtown business. I wouldn't necessarily say, and this is just semantics, necessarily to assume the responsibilities of those, but to identify a committee, what do we need to do, right? In other words, we work with the
Yep,
downtown
yeah.
business community, what would be a concrete objective for that committee to
Right.
work on for a
Yeah.
period of time that would help the downtown business community?
Okay, that was the sentiment.
Yep.
Okay. I think the main reason I worded it the way I did was, rather than have us look at a vacuum at, well, we've dropped two committees, so let's create a new committee that will figure out what it does. It ought to be the voice of the downtown, but not just the voice that, it ought to include the voice of downtown businesses, but I'm a little sensitized after we had the 40B projects, and recognizing that there's this whole community of people who live downtown, who also have a vested interest in the downtown. It ought to be a combined thing. Let's see. On the next page, for the goal 2 area, The question I had for you, Mike, on those two, under the first bullet, was how does this mesh with the budget process and financial policy? So this is not, I'm against them, it's just that I wasn't sure if this was calling out something different, or if this was just.
No, this is it. This is
that's
just
it.
doing it.
Okay.
I think when I did this, we hadn't done all of it yet.
Okay.
So this is kind of saying, let's,
So again, we may wind up rationalizing, but for now, got it.
that's what we're talking about.
Okay, and then I know, and then the very first item, complete, and this was one that was already there, complete and approved 20-year capital maintenance plan. And then on the next bullet down, the last item, which was actually, I put it here, complete the long-term capital maintenance plan partially developed in FY18. The only issue is, does it go up front in proactively planning for the maintenance, or does it go in the second bullet, ensuring adequate funding for the ongoing maintenance? Because it seems like the capital maintenance plan has got more to do with driving the financial.
Right, but the second bullet has to do with transportation, water, and sewer, and the first one is maintenance and upgrade of buildings, so I think.
That would answer that, yep, okay, so that answers that question, mine goes away, okay. On the second bullet, again, now these items that are not highlighted were already there. But the second item, implement pavement management system, begin development long-term plan, I think we completed it in FY18, so it goes away. Okay. Third one sounded good to me, still develop a plan, none of us called it out, but develop a plan to fund those building improvements, repairs deemed necessary and appropriate for funding.
That should be
So
up in there.
that also goes up there, okay. And we move this thing up there, got it. Third bullet, so I just want to make sure we're straight on what we want to do. Originally, the objective, first goal under the third bullet was increased from 400,000 to 450,000, the OPEB contribution. FY19, it's a $400,000 contribution. I think we said 425.
I would change it to 425.
And that's in 425,000 in the FY20 budget, okay. The next one down, dedicate 20% of the proceeds from any land sales to the OPEB trust over and above the 450. I said,
I would take
okay,
it
but
out.
do it, take it out. Okay,
So
that was my,
That's in the policy now.
speaking of the OPEB chairman, even I'm saying, I think we want to drop that, okay.
Right.
Then you had one, develop a plan, I think I now understand it based on what Christine just said, when it said, develop a plan to reduce employee usage of town health benefits. When I read that, I said, I think the only way to do that is headcount reduction, but that's now that I understand what you're
No,
talking
it's not a
about,
creative way of thinking.
I'm on board with that, okay, I got that. And I think.
You okay with that, Pete?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And modify OPEB goals in light of recently approved financial policy.
We just did.
I assume we did, check.
Well, yeah.
We go down to goal 3, first bullet. I had both, from my standpoint, both of those, the one that was originally written there. And Pete, I think what I did is rather than carry yours as a separate goal, I just appended it to the stuff we already had
Yep.
there as a single goal.
Yep.
The next one down, provide housing for Medfield's adults who are capable of living independently with assistance. I had a question mark there. I don't think we have any plans for FY19 for this kind of housing, but I wanted to make sure that I was correct, that there's nothing in the works for that in FY19.
So this is part of the housing production plan.
Yep.
And so we have been working on it.
Yep.
And so we are kind of in the phase of, we have met a number of, we, the Affordable Housing Trust, have met with a developer of these facilities on a number of occasions, and they are looking for an appropriate building. And so we have in the 2-year Affordable Housing Trust plan that we adopted in our 2-year plan of procedures, we have allocated in our budget a certain amount towards this. And what we're trying to find is the match to the location.
Okay.
And so what they're really looking for is a tear down. So they're kind of looking for an abandoned house that they can tear down, because it's cheaper for them to build what they need from scratch. They really need a big ranch house, you know, a 1-floor living, 5 bedrooms, kind of with all the setup they need. And it's easier to do that if you have a building that's kind of basically slated for demolition anyway.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to find the right location, and the trust will provide money to bridge the gap between what they can afford and the cost of the land.
Is there anything specific we should put in for?
I don't think so.
Okay, so it's fine leaving that blank.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't disband the Affordable Housing Trust.
Yeah. No.
Keep your eye out for houses, too.
Right, keep your-
Then the other, your goals, Mike, all blue, those all look fine to me. Pete, the only thing I appended to yours on implementing the Medfield State Hospital Master Plan Committee, I would have added the words begin to implement
Yep,
as opposed to
Sure.
fully implement,
Yep.
so that's.
yep, good change.
And then the
When you
next,
say begin to implement,
as opposed to complete the implementation.
well, as
so-
opposed, I wanna do something with the state hospital.
yeah.
I'm not on board with trying to implement the master plan as written. I'm for moving forward with development on the hospital, so I don't agree that we should be trying to implement the master plan as written. But I'm fine with implementing, planning and development and disposition of, according to whatever plan we ultimately adopt. Because we're gonna do an RFI, we're gonna get feedback on it, the plan might change. I'm personally not committed as a goal that we're gonna implement the plan that they have put together in the map that they've laid out as described in the.
I think we're still working that through, so I think that some sort of more generic thing, like you say, is fine.
Would that be,
Or implement a master plan and
Okay.
development for the hospital, because I think it,
I mean, that then sounds like it could be the one we have, or we could be starting from scratch.
well, I don't think we
I
should
mean,
start
I-
from
I-
scratch,
yeah.
I'm not, I don't
Could
think
it-
what they're doing.
Could we
is-
say implement the final Medfield State Hospital Master Plan?
You took out the committee.
Get rid of the committee part, yeah.
Made the finals, Medfield
The
Hospital
final.
master plan, and leave open as to what it's gonna be.
Yeah, okay,
Right.
yeah, okay.
I'm certainly.
I don't think that, I don't think that's changing the sentiment of the goal.
No, I don't think so either.
The next two that were on the next page, I thought those were both fine. I thought they were both fine, one of them's mine.
Yeah, I think
okay,
those are
okay.
both fine.
On goal number 4, the first goal, again, so partly, I think you get into some of mine. The main reason I started adding mine at the back is these are more qualitative goals. They are not necessarily selectmen's goals. These, some of this stuff starts to get at what the town does across the board. So I added the first one on the first bullet, and one on the third bullet, and then the question I had, given what we just approved tonight, is whether we should put in for the second bullet, implementing the connections program that Nancy wrote. It's a thing.
She gets her
Yeah.
grant.
Yeah. So and I'm just trying to put something there that shows what we're doing. That's, okay. Next page, last page, goal number 5, I like my first goal. In the second bullet, we have 3 items here, and the question I asked was, are these 3 items basically listed in kind of the order of priority of importance?
So I think you've given me credit for, Pete, the trees were yours, right?
I certainly had trees.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I'm not opposed to them, I don't wanna falsely take credit for.
Right, no, I think you're right. I think I caught that and then I didn't change it. So Pete, these all 3 are yours, unless you claim the first one, Mike, and I just color coded them wrong.
Yeah, they look familiar to me.
Yeah, the only question, the question I had is this kind of in priority order? Develop a public tree inventory and tree planting plan of these 3 goals. That's probably the first one in priority, planting trees in front of the post office, dressing up landscaping the lawn in front of the town hall. They're kind of, maybe it doesn't matter. Are you all okay with all 3 of those? Maybe the
I
priority.
mean, they're just different levels of significance.
That was kind of what prompted me to do the priority, but as I'm looking at it, it's like, these are goals. Either they are goals or they're not goals. If it's reasonable for us to get all 3 of these things done.
I mean, the post office is set to go, we just need to agree on the trees and talk to the people at the post office about a time to plant them.
So all 3 of those goals are fine. Okay. So that takes care, so those goals all are goals that relate to the kind of strategic goals that we've worked on. This is my interpretation, so you can disagree with it. Let me give you a big picture of what I did on these last 2 pages. What I was looking at was some of the goals, and a lot of these are yours, Pete, were specific direction going either to DPW, the police department, and I think some are even fire maybe. And they didn't map, I couldn't easily map, it's not that they're not things that they can do, it's just that they didn't easily map for me back to the strategic goals. So I put them here saying, well, if we want to list these out, they're kind of, for me, they were kind of action items as opposed to
They
two
are.
goals for the year. So we can maintain an action item list, but I didn't want to get them confused with the goals. So that's the big picture. I think I already asked Mike about the October 1st, 2018. I said, why not December 1st? But
Just
it wasn't that we couldn't do it, yeah, so that was just a reaction to that. The hiring new police chief, adopting local option speed limits, converting the town clerk. On the town clerk, the only question I had is that something we need to do now, given that she just got reelected to a 3-year term? I'm quite happy to do it, it's just, I wasn't sure.
My only thought would be if she decided to retire or
That's
leave
okay,
before the
yeah,
end of her term, we want to be in a
okay.
position that, you know, it's not to interrupt her tenure. I mean, it's,
Right.
it'll, the change would happen after
okay.
Carol's done, but
Yeah.
if she
All right,
did leave
how about
early, just then you'd be in a position to kind of.
So I withdraw
fold it
that
in.
question.
So,
Then, now I'm getting into a couple of yours, Pete. The third one, next one down, town administrator plan, prepare and implement an annual planning calendar for BOS meetings and the budget cycle leading to the end of town meeting. I don't have any problem with the budget cycle part of it, but my reaction to that was, shouldn't the Board of Selectmen be shouldn't we be the ones set our schedule? I don't have a problem with the town administrator coming up with a draft, but
Yeah.
it felt like we were asking the town administrator
So what-
to tell us what we're gonna do.
No, not at all.
Okay.
But I think that, well, my goal has been to, first of all, take all the things that we did every year, that we should be doing every year, and having them scheduled out.
Right,
Because what I've discovered is that things just don't get done.
yep,
And so that I think if we have an annual calendar of that sort where we plug in all of the things that we need to be doing every year, and work off of the budget schedule, because that's what we're really working up to town meeting, to make sure that everything gets done. And some things we can do in the summer, like talk about selectmen goals or tasks of that sort, or if we need to review the town administrator, I think that's a good time to do that sort of task. But it's just a question of getting it done, and what we don't always administer everything, and so that we can create it, but then if we need the town administrator to administer it.
okay.
And in the past, it just hasn't been administered, so it's just fallen off the table, and a lot of stuff hasn't gotten acted on.
So is it the actual planning you're talking about, or the administration? I was gonna suggest town administrator either support or work with the Board of Selectmen to plan and implement.
And implement, sure,
That's
yeah,
good,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, just like
Okay. My issue was just, I thought we should own our own schedule. Next one down, weekly written reports from town administrator, residents with information update. The question I had was, how is this action different than what the town administrator already does at Board of Selectmen meetings to talk about what the major?
It's just a different format. I mean, in other institutions that I've been in, at LaSalle College, and at Beth Israel Deaconess Needham, and at Riverside, the CEO was always the person who was the most knowledgeable person in the room about the issues, but they were also the person that was writing the information up that was then being sent out to the people who were part of that institution. And that's different here. It's different here because Mike doesn't do that.
Mhm.
To me, that is something that I would think a town administrator should be doing.
Well, this says going to the residents, not to the, I mean, it sounds like you're talking about, in those institutions, there's
Well,
information going out to the employees.
And the alums or whoever are the groups that make up the different entities. But I hear, I mean, the residents are really the owners of this town government ultimately, so they're the ones that should be getting the information.
So here's my concern. The biggest issue I had was I couldn't visualize both what this thing would be and how it would be distributed. Now, it may just be it's an email.
Yeah, I
And what
would
I'm
think so.
concerned about is that we not put an administrative information burden on the town administrator, sending sending a weekly newspaper out about what's going on with the town to people who may or may not care about it, when there are ways to find the out. So it's a
There-
practical issue. The concern I have is this potentially puts an incredible time-draining administrative burden on the town administrator unless we're very precise about what we're talking about. And right now, I'm saying that in selectmen's meetings, the town administrator provides an update, and anybody wants to know, they can watch the video or they can come to the meetings. So I'm trying to understand the problem it's solving.
I think that the issue for me is that I don't expect people to show up at our selectmen's meetings, and I don't expect a lot of people to watch them on TV. And so that it's just,
So, no, the short answer is, so Pete every week is pleasantly surprised.
that Bill is here. But, yeah, it's just, I think it's, to me, it's sort of an essential part of the task of running the town, is to report to the town on what's going on.
But I don't,
And there's-
okay, so register, I'll
And,
register.
you know,
I don't
weekly
know
may
if
not
that
be the
happens.
right increment in which to do it, but it shouldn't be just annually. It shouldn't be in the town report. It should be maybe monthly. It's the right,
I mean,
But how much of it is, I have the same concern Gus does. I'm just thinking to myself, like, when I write up a summary of one of our meetings, it takes me a fair amount of time to do it,
Yeah.
right? Now, maybe I'm a slow writer, but that's just one meeting, right? And so, I would have the concern if we're asking for sort of a narrative discussion of what's going on. I mean, I think that some of this may have something of a technological solution. If we're gonna get better and better, the department heads are gonna get better and better at putting things on the website. You know, this report could be something, it wouldn't necessarily have to be generated by the town administrator, it may be generated by the assistant to the town administrator, and it may be the equivalent of like an email, one of those aggregator emails that you have on news articles, right? It's just a set of links.
Yep.
And so you could have almost automatically generated at the website a set of links of, here's the committees that met during this past week.
Yeah.
Maybe there was a 200-word blurb, here's a couple of the major things that have happened, and then you've kind of gathered together upcoming meetings, you know, what's going on with the planning board, what's going on with different departments, without the town administrator having to sit down and draft kind of a lot of words on a weekly or bi-weekly basis.
And to be clear, Mike already does do this. He does it with Ann Thompson's show on, I always forget the title.
Happenings in Medfield.
Happenings in Medfield. I mean, he gives that kind of summary of what's going on. Is it once a month, Rachel, do you know? When
It's a fluid schedule.
when enough happens in Medfield, Ann Thompson does the happenings in Medfield, and Mike comes and talks about it. So we actually do have some of that information going out. It's the administrative burden that I'm leery of, just to kind of throw information
so maybe
out
what you
there.
do is you take that video and you create a link and you just, push it out to people. So that-
We have that now, we have that ability. As soon as I post the YouTube link on the Board of Selectmen's page on agendas and minutes, if you've gone to our website and signed up for notifications,
Mhm.
which we actually have 145 people signed up, they automatically get an email and or text message saying, the Board of Selectmen have just posted a video, and here's the link for it. So I think our job, as department heads, is to get more and more people signed up for that. Because you may not be interested in what's happening at the DPW, you're only focused on the Affordable Housing Trust, so you'll only get the emails from that. But if you wanna find out what every committee is doing in town, you can sign up for that as well. So that may be a way to bridge that for all of you.
So can we maybe soften exactly what we do? The sentiment is you'd like to be able to push information out to people that are interested.
Absolutely, yeah.
That, I
Yep.
think, so.
I mean, and it comes from the fact that the press doesn't really cover Medfield much anymore. We're very fortunate now that Mike Gleason is an excellent journalist, but he seems to have left.
And the back.
And we're fortunate that Colleen is writing a lot too.
I can see the
but-
headline in tomorrow's patch. Selectmen
But
laughing.
basically, the Hometown Weekly doesn't really cover the town.
Right.
And the Medfield Press has historically not covered the town very well until Mike Gleason came. I mean, it depends, there were times when there were reporters that were very good, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Allison Bosma was here too.
Yeah.
She did a very nice job.
Yes, she was good, yep.
So,
And there was that guy that wore the stocking cap and actually worked away on his laptop, he was good. Yeah, and he didn't like writing once a week, so he went to a daily paper. But, so my goal is just to get information out of the townhouse to the residents.
If you all would like me to, I will try to synthesize everything we've said here into yet another draft.
Sure.
And then probably at that point, I'll let you, that one, where I would go with that and say that the goal is to do a better job of pushing information out to residents, not necessarily specifying the town administrator must write a written report. We need to find the best ways to get information out, and the town administrator would be a driver of that process, so
Yep.
that again.
And ways of publicizing. it.
Yep.
That this is, you can sign up for these things if you have these questions, that, there are ways other than just sort of posting on Facebook and asking, what's the deal with this? Anyone know when the transfer station is open, right? There's a way to, there's a way to find that out.
Right.
And we have not publicized the notifications, that 145 people we have signed up for notifications is
Yeah.
because they've stumbled across it on the website.
Yeah.
On the homepage.
That's probably,
And we haven't publicized it until we went through the second round of training, so that more and more people were on it, and we're publishing more things to the website, so people will actually, be signing up for something,
Okay.
that will.
Make sure Patch gets more people signing up for a website, how's that?
Good.
We'll put it out
Good.
there.
There you go. Thank you very much, Mayor Sullivan. Patch Mayor Sullivan.
You're welcome. Say, don't ask me, go to the website. Yeah, I don't know.
Next one down, town administrator scheduled weekly meetings with department heads. So interestingly, it sounds like this is a moot point, based on what Christine had to say tonight. I actually disagreed with that, not because it's a bad thing to do, but because I said I don't think the selectmen should be getting involved in telling the town administrator exactly how to run the town. So I actually was against it in principle, not in purpose, but it sounds like Christine's doing it anyway, or planning to do it anyway. If we go down that path, that would be the plan. So I'll just say we'll leave it there. And but the reaction I had is that, to me, was selectmen getting a little too prescriptive in what a town administrator needs to do. The next several in that next box, I said, those are all DPW head assignments. When Richard DeSorger was a selectman, he kind of had a hit list of things that needed to be done, and this looks to me a little bit like that. And
He still emails us about it.
where I started hanging up on some of these, Pete, like the first one, install a sidewalk on Dale Street from Charlesdale to Grove. Do we actually know whether that's the priority for what we should do for sidewalk construction? Again, it's like suddenly we've just got some very specific things in this list that we're telling people to do, and I'm not at all, personally, I don't have any clue how important it is for that one particular thing to be done versus all the other sidewalk construction that the DPW might be doing. So it felt too prescriptive to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's gets onto another issue, which is that the selectmen actually talk about and decide all kinds of things that then get lost.
Mhm.
And the selectmen actually did prioritize all the sidewalks at one point. And the Dale Street was a very high one, actually, on the Metacomet was a very high one.
Mhm.
Dale Street, because it was a connector to that whole side of town there. And there's just a very short
Mhm.
space but it's got huge pine trees in it, which makes it problematic. So, I mean, this is, however you organize it, they're just sort of issues that should get addressed in some way or other.
So here's,
And they don't,
sorry.
somebody needs to be thinking about these topics as to where are the next sidewalks, and so that the selectmen actually thought about that. We had a decision that was made after consultation with the schools, but I think that got lost somewhere. I don't remember exactly what the,
I think it ultimately comes down to the funding issue.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, in
Yeah.
particular with the Dale Street one, it was not feasible to put the sidewalks, so you need to move and realign the road, and that was not something we had the funding for.
yeah, so that one's a
So
difficult
let
one.
me comment on Pete's point, because I recall a meeting probably 5 years ago when Pete brought this up, and I didn't think he got a very satisfactory response. So I'm not against what you're getting at. I didn't know about that full prioritization. The issue for me is that the kind of thing we put on an action item, action list like this? Or is the real issue that you're bringing up is there was a point in time when the selectmen worked with DPW to prioritize sidewalks, and we should have an agenda item on the selectmen's meeting where we sit down with DPW and say, we had a list to prioritize listings. Mo, you've got the pavement management in place. What we'd like to do is update with you what the priorities are for the sidewalks. And with, I would say, an expectation of greater responsiveness than I saw 5 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, part of this is historic. I mean, the selectmen have been looking for cost figures for the sidewalk up along Main Street because that's one of the big connectors to get up to the existing sidewalk that I think is just on the other side of Shaw's. And it would be nice to connect that area all the way to the downtown. But for whatever reason, the former DPW superintendent just never got us the information. So, I mean, that's part of why that's on this list here.
And my sense of this is that, and this is not just from this list, that we need a kind of sidewalk plan.
Yeah.
And I think we need those cost estimates. And I think, because the other area that we have to look at from a sidewalk standpoint is, both with the new development on Hospital Road, the potential for Medfield State Hospital, we have to think about how does one get up there.
Right. That area needs to get connected
on
to the
sidewalks,
downtown.
especially since Harding Street is such a very dangerous street to walk on, or run on, or other than at 6 o'clock in the morning. You wouldn't
pretty
necessarily
dangerous
want,
then,
yeah, you wouldn't want young kids walking up Harding Street too. And I know in the long run, there's a plan for, I know we've gotten easements for the sidewalk down Adams Street, which would go down Adams Street and then connect over to the Ice House Road, and then conceivably you could connect via McCarthy Park up that way. But we need a plan for it, right? And I think this is one of those things that, sidewalks are one of those things that provides a great value to the people of the town, but is not a priority for DPW in the day-to-day management of what they have to do, because it's sort of an extra, and it's just not the kind of emergency item that comes up. But I do think it's something that we should focus on. But I think we have to balance, without the cost information, we can't do the planning we need to do, which is balancing the bang for the buck, right? If you can get a mile of sidewalk for $100,000 over here, or 200 yards for $100,000 over there, well, you should get the mile over there, right?
Probably,
Because it's just gonna help more people. So I think we should put that on maybe as a goal for the development of a sidewalk plan. And whether that can be folded into the townwide master planning process, or it's a separate planning with DPW, because there are, to your point, Pete, there are sidewalk plans floating around, but they're never really together. And they tend to happen when, for whatever reason, as with the Metacomet, like, there's a focus on getting this one particular one done, and not kind of a longer term view. Because that's also something, the funding for which should be in the mix for the capital budget, right?
Should be part of the
And that's
capital
something
budget.
that when DPW is looking at their funding and looking at what we're spending on, and that's a capital budget item, we can say, okay, we have this $200,000 sidewalk we need to build, how do we build that into the capital budget and prioritize it? So, I would add that as a goal, and maybe I would put it under.
We probably could put it in somewhere under that.
Yeah,
that's-
I would put it
okay.
under either, it's really a quality of life.
You could go under Goal 2, ensure adequate funding for the ongoing maintenance and upkeep of the town's transportation, water and sewer infrastructure.
It's a version of that, I would do that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
I would add that. And maybe the answer is, the cheapest and best way to do it is to fold it in as part of a townwide master plan, or maybe Mo has an idea for how to do it.
Okay.
And to think through it, and I think that's a good addition,
okay.
Pete.
So put that way, then it makes sense for me to be in the actual goals. My general comment about all the DPW tasks and all the police department tasks is that they were very specific, very prescriptive things. Some of them were almost administrative.
They are.
Some of them, like now that I understand what you had in mind and what the background was, I at first looked at that as saying, well, this is a decision, this installing the sidewalk reflects a decision that I didn't make, that we didn't discuss, that just seems to be there because we added it to an action list. Now that I understand what's behind it, it's actually a broader goal, and I'm on board with it, so that's fine. Some of these other ones that are either directed to DPW or police, I wouldn't have put them at all on this list, unless there's other ones like that really do have there's actually more to it than just the specific mechanical task that's here. There may be some broader ones, you know, there's a broader purpose.
So, and all of these really are just aimed at getting the certain departments to report to the selectmen. I don't think that we get enough reporting from the police, the fire, and the DPW. I mean, we're starting to get things from Mo, but I'd like to have regular reports from the police and the fire.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I want, again, it's not that I don't want reports about things that I, as a selectman, should know, but I don't want to either put a big administrative burden on to just get routine. I can read, Colleen posts the police log if I want to know what's there. If there's exceptional to be honest, if there are exceptional things in those departments, I would look to the town administrator
Sure, yeah.
to flag, hey, this thing happened here and you need to know about it.
I think, for instance, with the police, I think that selectmen should probably just know on a general basis how many citations are issued every month.
I don't really,
I mean, it's,
I
you
mean, I
know,
don't care.
I'm not sure I care either, but if it's 3, I do care. If it's 1,000, I care.
I mean, if we get
I think
complaints
it's
from the
1,000, you
citizens.
hear about it.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
I think
if
that
we get
part of-
complaints for the citizens, then I would care, but.
Well, we do get complaints. We get complaints about speeding and cars driving fast all the time. And so,
Boy, that's
I
a
mean, I think
legitimate, that's a legitimate
and
issue.
that's an enforcement issue. So that's an issue as to how many citations are being issued. I know, for instance, that I'm very unlikely to get stopped in Medfield because we don't enforce anywhere near as adamantly as Dover does. And so that my driving is different in Dover than in Medfield.
Right. Everyone makes up for lost speed,
But I-
come to Medfield, it's like, all right, Westwood, all right, we're good.
But I mean, I think that's a policy issue that I think the selectmen should be weighing in on.
Well,
But on that question of statistics, like the police department statistics, I know we publish they're collected somehow, right? And so, I know we publish some of the information in the annual report. And so, maybe it wouldn't be that hard just to provide this.
I asked Chief Meany, and he said it wouldn't be any problem at all, but we never got him.
well, if that's the only thing we care about, I agree. What I'm getting at is saying we want reports. My comment is, I don't want just a bunch of routine data being thrown at me. It's possible that there's some sort of a town operations dashboard that would be a selective set of data that we actually would like, and we'd like to get it into a single-page graphic or tabular form that just lets us look and see that the pulse of Medfield hasn't spiked in the last week or 2 weeks, and I'm open to that. I was reacting a little bit to just saying, oh, we need reports from all of you, so in addition to everything we already get, we will then have our department heads all writing reports that may or may not be of any value. So it's the precision and the focus. If we want to, if the issue of traffic enforcement has risen to the level that the Board of Selectmen need to pay attention to it, which it possibly has, and we basically say, you know, because this is an important issue and because we want to drive this issue, we would like you to begin providing through the town administrator the statistics of how many tickets you've written, then I'm okay with that. That's kind of like not just the ongoing, here's today's week, or here's this week's report. There's a real purpose to it. There's a real thing we're looking at, and there's a real issue we're working. Then that makes sense to me. But not just generally report and tell us what's going on. I want the exception stuff. I don't want just stuff.
Right.
See what I'm saying?
And a lot of this stuff is going to be handled differently when there's a different town administrator.
Yeah, okay. So, give me guidance. My first reaction for our purposes, not to strike this from everybody's memory, but my first reaction would be just to drop all of these tasks that I categorize as DPW tasks and police department tasks, not because we might not want to ask the police department or DPW to do some of them, but putting them on some sort of an action item document that we have here isn't probably the way we would go about getting it done anyway. And you can push back, this is an administrative suggestion, it's not, you know, we can have this however we want it to be.
I mean, I don't care how it gets accomplished, I just think it's something that we should be looking at getting it accomplished.
We just call it increased oversight of whatever it is.
Yeah.
from a goal standpoint, increased oversight of the police or increased oversight of DPW and increased oversight of the fire department.
That doesn't help. It's like, I'm having a vague and fuzzy goal that I don't know what it means doesn't help us. I'm suggesting we don't need them on this list at all, which is not to say these are unreasonable things to ask for. I'm not saying that. But if I go back to Richard's checklist, this thing we're going to probably look at once a year. We're going to document it, and then it's going to go there. These kinds of things, this list is probably a dynamic list of what we'd like to see done in town that goes every month. So I'm looking at it as not a particularly valuable place to capture it. It's here, so I don't have a problem with capturing it. It's just that I don't think this is going to have any real impact in terms of actually getting those things done.
Well, as I say, Gus, I don't care where it gets put. It's just, to me, it's an important thing to have the town focus, or the selectmen focus on making sure that these sorts of things are done, are handled.
Okay, then let me ask the more general.
You know, the parking issue on the traffic conditions on Upham Road, I mean, we've been talking about that for years, and yet no one is addressing it, so.
So let me try asking a more general question. These 2 pages, which I kind of, I made my judgment and said they don't belong in this annual goals planning because they don't fit into the strategic categories. I guess what I'm really saying is these 2 pages appended to the back of the goals that we review once a year as a tool probably won't do very much. We could break this out as its own separate document, which is the Board of Selectmen's to-do list. And it can, and anything that's, bubbles up to the level of we would like action and we would like action now on this particular thing, we can capture it in that list. How do we want to use these last 2 pages?
I mean, I'll offer a suggestion, and this is borrowing from something that we do now for the Affordable Housing Trust. That we keep, that Jim Brand puts together, and he keeps a list of every project that's been proposed to us and sort of the status. So, any discussions, anything that's come up sort of publicly, once a month, we update this list, and you can kind of look and see where things stand. Some of them are, this was proposed, nothing happened. I could see taking this list of things that, because really, your point, Pete, is good, and it's sort of about accountability, right? In other words, these are things that we want to get done. Are they getting done? And it's also, these are all things that at different times people in the town are interested in. And so if you kept that kind of a chart, I don't think that.
It's like an action item list. That's probably Excel spreadsheet table. Okay. That makes sense to me.
I'm just looking for it now. We called it the Selectmen's to-do list.
Yeah.
And I think I had sent it out, and mostly it was Richard's items and an update for it. So when I locate it, I'll send it to you, and we can add these items to it.
We add these
but-
things, and then that could be something that's just on the website too.
Yep.
Yep.
And so people can see this is, and again, I don't think
I'll buy
that would be
that.
a
I'll
ton-
buy that, yeah.
I don't think it's a ton of work to maintain.
No.
But you could add, you could put in a one-line progress report or whatever, and it would sort of organize some of this. I think would that work for you, Pete?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
yeah.
let me suggest then that we break this out as a separate document. It's probably an Excel spreadsheet, to be honest with you.
That's exactly how I have it. I just can't
Okay.
put my
And
fingers
I'll-
on it. I'd say it was done recently, but time runs
That-
together.
that's
It was
okay.
2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, but I will find it.
If we break this away from our goal document and we make it into an Excel spreadsheet, then I'm okay with,
Right.
that's great.
And
Okay.
I will note on that list, I mean, the convert the town clerk to an appointed position was on Mark's memo to the selectmen from 1996 as an action item, so. We're moving. What is it, Lotus 1, 2, 3 or whatever?
What I'll do is I'll update this.
Yep.
I'll get it out to you guys before, I'll make a point of updating it before next week's
Okay,
meeting.
great, thank you.
Going into next week's meeting, I'll try to get it out to you, out ahead of time, and I'll try to stay shut up next time, and you can react to what I wrote.
All right, great. All right, town administrator update, the town administrator.
I know he has something he would like to speak with you
Oh, he
about,
does.
so
Oh.
can you find him?
He's still here?
I think so. I thought he was staying. If not, I'll deliver the message.
I got the impression he might have gone home.
Oh, okay.
I will tell you what has Mike
Oh.
so angry.
Uh-oh.
He's angry. Hasn't been back long enough to be angry.
Uh-oh.
Oh, yes, he is.
Oh, yes.
You gotta deliver it with that particular tone. Colleen's got her pen out. All right, tune in.
Scratch
Mike
Selectmen,
Gleason, you should have stuck around, right?
The justice. He might be as red as you, but he's not gonna do it the justice.
He's like, hold the presses, hold the presses.
late breaking news, catch exclusive.
So the governor's budget has been released,
Mm-hmm.
and Mark went through it line by line. And Karen Spilka, who is now the president of the Senate, secured $25 million in funding for the public safety building in Ashland.
Seriously.
Seriously. And I happened to talk to my town administrator group today, and they are incredibly angry town administrators. Mike is not the only one. Southborough was able to finally, after 3 times going to the ballot to get money for funding for their building that they're under construction now, and they didn't get any money. I think it was Princeton is in the district of the outgoing Senate president, and they got $9 million for their public safety building. Granby got 2, Needham got 2.
It's 113 of the legislative acts of 2018, if anybody wants to look at it.
So some of those numbers seem to be more in line of what is usually given to representative districts, but the 25 million seemed excessive for one town to have for their public safety building, when all the other towns in this area have asked their taxpayers to pay for their public safety building. So I did not deliver that with as much venom as Mike would.
I'm just glad he wasn't mad at us.
That's what I was hoping.
Sorry.
You're gonna have to call him back when these things come up in the future.
I'm gonna give him a little soapbox.
All right, thank you, Christine.
You're welcome.
Selectman report, Selectman Peterson.
So it was remarkable at my office hours this month that I had 3 separate people come up to me and talk to me about the tax increase from the annual town meeting. These were older people, and they were really concerned. So that's just, there's nothing to be done about that, I guess. But and then the other thing that I guess I kept you guys apprised of the fact that the water and sewer issues at the hospital are going to get addressed. Mose Goulet is pulling together some people to do that, so hopefully we'll get an answer on that.
All right, Gus?
Beyond just getting some of the data out for the senior housing survey, I don't have a whole lot to report on other town things. The only, I guess we didn't talk about this tonight. The resumes, I believe, for the development committee we're doing today.
Correct.
I would make an observation on that. I checked, some of you may have talked to Steve Nolan as well, I don't know, but Steve was not interested in continuing on with the development committee. He's put a lot of time and effort in on a lot of our committees. And I think it's quite understandable that he might want to take a break from some of that right now. And I've expressed my personal appreciation for all the time and effort he's put in. I told him when I talked to him, I didn't even fully realize until about 9 months ago how many different committees he supported. So that was there. The reason I bring that up is the one thing I've been trying to do that I have not yet been successful at doing is to identify, we have candidates who have good backgrounds in the financial side of real estate development. I don't think we have any candidates yet who have the background on the actual operating side of putting buildings up. And I'm not so far, I haven't been able to uncover anyone that in town that has that kind of skill and experience at the scale of the kind of project that we're talking about at the state hospital. So if that holds true and we just don't have that, I think we'll have to think a little bit about the nature of that development committee, given the skill set that we may be able to get on that development committee, and what that, how that might influence how we go about moving ahead. So.
Okay. The only update I have, we had a Affordable Housing Trust Board meeting on August 2nd to talk about Bob Borelli's proposed development on Adams Street, on 96 Adams Street, where the existing house is. He's proposing to take down the house at that location and put in a road into a cul-de-sac kind of behind the houses on Adams Street. It's a similar, not quite as long or as big as Turtlebrook. It's sort of a similar kind of development with duplexes, over 55 focus. There were a number of neighbors there. He'd already had an abutters meeting. I think the view of the neighbors was mixed. Some were strongly in favor of it, some were against it. And we'll take it up again in the first Thursday in September. It doesn't really fit with the current schedule of Safe Harbor. It's an ownership project, so it's a 16-unit ownership project, so it'll only yield 4 SHI units. On the other hand, it is a senior-focused development. We only have, Turtle Brook is really the only one we have like it. And so I think from the trust board perspective, that made it kind of worth considering, in addition to the fact that Mr. Borelli's done good work on a lot of developments in town. And so, we didn't discuss it substantively. We just kind of got the initial report from him and the initial layout and the rest of it. And I think he'll take some of the feedback from that meeting and come back in the first Thursday in September. So, but that's I don't think I have anything other than that. So, barring that,
Yeah, I do. One quick, I already mentioned it to some of you. The alleged aggressive dog is deceased, as a result of which I had an email from the attorney for the dog owners suggesting that it was moot, and did I disagree, which I don't. He also copied the attorney for the victim family, who also indicated that he agreed it was moot and it could be removed from the agenda, so I want to be able to get back to them, say the selectmen also agree, and it's off the agenda next week. So if that's permissible,
Deceased for
died. The dog
causes
just died.
totally unrelated to any prior event.
The diagnosis is what's called bloat, which
Yes.
is something that
Yeah.
affects dogs
Right.
frequently.
Yeah, especially poodle. Okay.
I
is that
agree. I think it's moot at this point.
All right, I shall confirm with them tomorrow then.
Okay, very well.
Thanks, Mark.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All right, next meeting at 6 o'clock, next Tuesday, executive session. Open session at 7 o'clock. We have a bunch of signing here to do as well.
Don't go anywhere, lots of